I've been looking forward to this because for years people have asked me questions about parenting their children at the specific age that the child is at. So people want to know if teaching self-government will work for their 2-year-old, because they'll say, well, this is really great if you have older children and if they can understand this, but what about my 2-year-old? And they'll think, surely this is too complicated and it can't apply to a 2-year-old. And then people will come to me with a question on the other side of it and say almost the exact opposite thing. Well, I could see where this would be really helpful if a person was starting out with their children like this and the children were really young. Like they'll see certain things, like we have these charts and stuff, and they'll see these pictures and they'll say, well, I can see how, this is intended for young children. And, we've got the children's books and things. And they'll say, but what if I have a 15-year-old? Or what if I have a 17-year-old? And they're not sure that this would then apply the same for that age. And so, and actually I have people come to me and say, what about my 25-year-old? What about my 30-year-old? We're always, as parents, concerned about our children, no matter the age they're at. And we want to make sure that we tailor fit whatever we're doing to help them for their age, for their developmental level, where they're at and what they need. Now, the answer that I always tell everybody is yes, of course, it works for everybody, because I started with foster children who were all ages 12 to 18. That's how it began for me. And then, of course, I've raised my children with this all the way along, and they, started doing it when they were just babies. And so I do know that it works for every single age. But what I don't see, the reason why I just say yes, it does work for all ages. I hope people will go and get the learning that they need, because I don't have time, say at a table at a conference or something like that, to go into all the different developmental levels and how maybe we would make different variances for a specific child in a specific developmental phase. And so this is the time where I'm going to do that. So I'm super excited because there are differences. Teaching self-government does look a little bit different depending on the age of the person and how they see themselves in a relationship. So those are the two key factors that we're going to be discussing today, specifically the developmental age that they are, but then also another key factor with how you can do the teaching with someone is how they see themselves in a relationship. So we're getting back to the roles thing, and hopefully you all know I have this book called Roles, The Secret to Family, Business, and Social Success, where I talk about the importance for self-mastery of understanding who you are. Not just responsibilities that you have to do in a certain setting, but who you really are. And if a person understands who they are in their relationship with their child, or their child understands who they are in their relationship with their parent, then that person actually can handle a different level of teaching too. So that's almost like a foundational, number one. Who are we in this family? Because if we can't establish that, then everything else we will do will just be perceived as manipulation, even if it's not manipulation. So we need to remember that. Okay, so my usual response is, yeah, this works for everyone. Every age needs the same teaching self-government principles and skills. And that response is true, absolutely true. So look at adults, for instance. We need to disagree appropriately with the mechanic who didn't fix the car properly, which I had to do yesterday. And we need to disagree appropriately with the online shipping company who sent us the wrong product in the mail, or it's not going to arrive on time when they said it was going to arrive on time, and all those little stresses and worries and things that we deal with in our adult lives. As adults, we also need to accept no answers, such as the no answer that comes when a child wakes up in the night and we have to wake up as adults to care for that child in the night instead of sleep, which is what we would rather do. or when we have to work through an addiction, maybe a really difficult addiction that has crept into the family, into the lives of one of our children or one of our loved ones. We have to accept the no answer. We have to be able to look at the situation, keep a calm face, voice, and body, say, okay, this is what's happening. I need to handle this, and it's okay. And then we need to drop the subject, which means we need to not sit and stew over it and obsess over it, right? We need to be able to accept a no answer and be okay no matter what happens. So anyway, I have to say, when the movie Frozen came out, I didn't love it the best. And recently I've seen an amazing version of Frozen, like a Broadway version that's showing at Disneyland right now. Anyway, and as I saw that, I thought, oh, this show is actually growing on me. And there's things, well, I love the Broadway. It was amazing. But there's things in this show that are deeper than I thought they were. So I realized that actually, Anna, which is the person that has the freezing powers. Anyway, that sister, she closes herself in a room to keep herself away from everybody for years, right? And she keeps herself closed off and away. And so poor Elsa has a closed door in her face her whole life, and she doesn't have anybody to play with or to talk to or to look up to or to get advice from or anything. And so she's socially a little awkward, and there's all these kinds of things that happen because that occurs in her life. But really what's happening is Elsa has something, I mean, not Elsa, Anna has something she doesn't like about herself, something that maybe could even cause danger. And so what she does is she just obsesses about it and obsesses about it and obsesses about it. She shuts that door and she thinks about it for years. And she worries over it for years instead of letting it go. And then one of the main songs in that show, and it never hit me until I just saw this show just this week, actually. And it hit me, this song, Love is an Open Door. You know how it goes, love is an open door. Okay, I can't probably get it right. But anyway, you know that song. Anyway, so that song actually is one of the key things to being able to accept a no answer. So what Anna needs to do is she needs to drop the subject. She needs to focus on loving the people around her, and everything will be okay. And so then when she's like, let it go, really, you could look at it in two ways. One that kind of bugged me at first, because I was like, really? We're just going to have no self-government whatsoever? It bothered me. I was like, no, we're not going to be promoting to children no self-government whatsoever. And at first, that's what she's doing when she's letting it go. She's like, fine, I'm not. But what she's really also doing is she's trying to drop the subject. I'm not going to worry about this anymore. I'm not going to worry about this anymore. And what she needed to do all along, she needed to drop the subject and focus with love on the people around her. In order to drop a subject, that's what we have to do. So there's a little tangent for you, but I feel like as adults, when we run into trouble, that's what we're doing. We're obsessing over it and thinking over it and not dropping the subject and not letting it go. When they come home late from their, they have a curfew or whatever, or they talk back to us immediately. All those things we didn't let go before, all those things we didn't drop the subject about before, are all of a sudden back in our mind and in our emotions, and we're flaring up again. So yeah, as adults, we need all of these skills. We also need to instruct ourselves. We need to correct ourselves as well as them, right? So these skills that we teach, the 5 teaching styles, which we're going to discuss again today, and the 4 basic skills, as well as all the ways to keep yourself on track and the deeper understanding of the philosophy behind all of this, we need to nurture ourselves with that information so that we are better at self-governing. It's super important. So not only are we parenting children, but we're parenting ourselves. And we've got to remember that no one's going to parent us anymore. And here's the thing, even if your children go way, way off, okay, even if they you do your very best with self-government, you channel, I shouldn't say channel, I don't like that word, but you within yourself, you get control and you're calm and you're loving and you're understanding and you're consistent and deliberate and all those things that you planned on being with your family, and still the child goes off the path. Still the child, once they hit adulthood or a little later on, they really struggle. That doesn't mean it was all for naught. And I want you to remember that, because we do have some cards stacked against us socially right now as parents. And maybe we'll take a little bit of time to discuss those things, especially when we start discussing the teenage years and launching into adulthood. But we have a lot of things stacked against us. Don't think that everything you do is a waste, though, because you're laying an incredible foundation for them. But not only that, you are self-governing you. You self-governing you is more important even than them learning to self-govern them. So keep that in mind. We are parenting ourselves first, and then we move on to parenting other people. Okay, so we need the skills and the truth to rely on for all of our relationships and problem solving, just like they do, even the relationships that we have with ourselves. So that's important too. Sometimes the most difficult relationship we have is the one with ourselves. We beat ourselves up. We don't accept no answers with ourselves. We assume we need to be perfect, all those kinds of things, which do not help. So, just like parents and adults need to apply self government in a unique way to help themselves conquer the challenges and solve their own problems, children and youth of every single age also need the ability to conquer themselves. They need to apply the teaching self-government skills and principles in their lives in a way that makes sense for where they're at in their unique stage of life. For instance, an 18-month-old doesn't have nearly as much self-awareness as an 18-year-old who is an emerging an adult or a youth, you might say. They're coming on adulthood. They have a lot of self-awareness. The only difference is that they don't necessarily want to see the truth. So now a toddler doesn't have hardly any self-awareness, but they only see the truth. Everything for them is very concrete. They don't understand sarcasm. They don't like to be laughed at or poked at or teased or used at the butt of their parents' jokes. They don't. They don't understand it. They don't like it. It doesn't feel safe. It feels like they're being used. And we see how many YouTube videos about this, like our children being used for the butt of our jokes. Yeah, they're cute. It's funny. It's like, oh my, I can't believe that child is saying that. Listen, Linda, listen, or all the things that they do. By the way, listen, Linda. We say that in our house all the time. I always say, oh, Linda, listen. And I always say that because the whole family has seen Listen, Linda. But at the same time, when we first saw Listen, Linda, everyone said, whoa, that mother should not allow that child to do that. And then some other people, whoa, I can't believe she would put that online. Do we still end up joking about it because it's now like a social thing to say, listen, Linda, listen? If you have not seen Listen, Linda, you can go to YouTube and type in Listen, Linda, and I'm sure it will pop up. Anyway, so yeah, why do we do that to our children? So the 18-month-old sees only truth and wants everything concrete. Okay? But the 18-year-old may want to kind of paint their their life, their misbehaviors in a kind of rose-colored glasses, right? To justify their lack of self-control, to make their lives a little bit easier so that they don't have to conquer as much, so that they can just hold on to some of those inappropriate behaviors here and there and not have to solve those yet. So they make excuses for themselves. And oh, what a shocker, parents and adults do the same thing. So the smarter we get, the more excuses we make for ourselves. If that's not like self-sabotage, I don't know what is. But that's something that we do. It's something that our brains do. And if we can recognize that that's happening, then hopefully we can conquer that. So each age group of people has unique things that are going on. We're going to spend a lot of time today going through those unique things that are happening. So I want to help you fine tune a bit of your teaching self-government today. Now, I know there's probably some people on here who are new to teaching self-government. So if you are completely new, I'm going to go to I just want to have an idea here. I'm going to well, we don't see a lot of faces. But if you're new to teaching self-government, raise your hand. Okay, a few people are new, kind of new. Somebody's raising a fly swatter. That's awesome. Okay. So anyway, well, so what we're going to do is for you that are new, we're going to try to get you caught up to speed. And for everybody else that is not new to teaching self-government, I hope that this is going to be a good refresher for you of the places that we're going. I'm assuming that a whole bunch of people on the replay are also going to be kind of new to teaching self-government. I think we're going to have the majority of people. We have like hundreds of people signed up for this. I don't think they're all here now. A lot of people are watching the replay, but you're the lucky ones because there's going to be some exciting stuff that happens here live that maybe on the replay they won't get to be part of. So anyway, especially the question and answer. So what we're going to do is we're going to review teaching self-government stuff, some of the skills and principles. We're going to try to get people caught up. I cannot go as deep into all of it as I would like to and still touch on how everything applies to each specific age. So there are going to be ways that you can get more information. In fact, one of those special things for people that are on this call today is that because it's not going to come out for everybody else on the replay for probably like another week. But for everybody that is here today, if you would like to come to the online parenting mastery that we're going to be doing October 10th, 11th, and 12th, it's online. We try to do an online one once a year. I mean, sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. We know that not everybody maybe has the time or the means to fly some of the live ones we do, which cost us a little bit more. But these online ones are really a lot of fun. We can have the comforts of our own home and sometimes even our children there to listen to what mom and dad are learning occasionally and that kind of thing. That is going to be for today. For all of you, the price is going to be discounted in half. So instead of $499, so like $500, it's going to be $250. And if that's something that you don't feel like you want to do, you can also do the implementation course instead of for $299 for $250. So both of those things, $250 if you want to do it. The Parenting Mastery Training is a 3-day training, and you and like your spouse gets to be part of this training together. And that's the cost for both of you together. You get personal mentoring and coaching on that. So anyway, we bring in mentors. I noticed a couple of our mentors are here on the thing with us today, and they come in and they help train you. We break into groups on this Zoom, and you get to have some personal coaching in small groups, and we learn everything way in depth. So it takes 3 days to go through everything to teach somebody teaching self-government. So everything else I do is just a start to help. So let's go ahead and get started helping with that. Well, by the way, the second thing that we're going to do is after we get that catch-up done and we get that review on teaching self-government done, then we will move into each age group. We'll discuss their brain development, their cognitive and emotional abilities that they have at specific ages, so that we can better fine-tune what we're doing with them and the problems that we're handling with them to those abilities that they have at that particular time. And then finally, at the end of this 3-hour block, we will have a question and answer section where I will answer all the questions that have been submitted. And if we have time, we'll answer some of the questions on the whoever's here live. You can also ask other questions. So that question and answer section will likely go over the 3-hour mark. I'm just going to go ahead and pre-teach that right now. I don't think with the amount of questions that I have had submitted, and I will try to answer them quickly, much more quick than I answer on my Teaching Self-Government support group calls that I do each week, which, you know, would be something that actually you would get to be part of as part of the parenting mastery training that happens. We give you access to support calls with me every week for 6 months after the training. So it really is the best way to get everything like under your belt, super secure. But that doesn't mean you have everything. And even some of our people who have been on the implementation course and stuff like that, I know are joining us today because this is a new class with new materials, which is super fun. Happy to share it with you today. So anyway, David probably has a link he could put in a chat for the question and answer section. If you have a question, you could probably type it in during the call or just write it down and you can ask one-on-one. Sometimes that's fun to just see somebody ask their own question. All right, so great. So let's talk about teaching self-government and what is teaching self-government. So if you have my book, sorry, I'm turning away here. I've got little supplies and stuff. If you have my book, Parenting a House United, which by the way, it's like the 10th anniversary. This thing has been out for 10 years. We have sold over 50,000 books. And you know, you don't see a lot of used copies out there, which makes me really happy because what that means is people are using it. Anyway, so in the front of that book, I give the definition of self-government. And self-government is being able to determine the cause and effect of any given situation and possessing a knowledge of your own behaviors so that you can control them. So what that means is two things. That means that you understand cause and effect. And that's not just basic like laws of motion, cause and effect, and like heat causes a burn, cause and effect, but cause and effect with your own behaviors in relationships is the main thing that you focus on when you're talking about your own self-government. Although you're going to be analyzing all of your behaviors over time, the more that you mature. But that's where our main focus is because the very first place that a person starts learning is in their bonding, in their relationships, and how they get understood and get the things that they want. So that's what our children end up needing at the very beginning, and that lays the framework for all of the other cause and effect learning that they will learn. The thing I have found is that many adults don't even understand cause and effect. So I don't know if that's something you've noticed. They don't understand that if they lash out at you, that, or if they, you know, say, you know, harsh words or something like that, then all of a sudden a person retreats, they put up a wall, they don't listen and respect. Instead, they focus on how they feel disrespected and how they feel misunderstood. That's what happens. It's not something, I mean, it's a manipulative tactic. They may do what you want because they don't know how to handle what's going on with you, but they don't actually develop more respect when you have louder, more harsh behaviors toward them. And you all know what I'm talking about because when another adult does that to you, you're like, whoa, you put up a wall. You're not sure if you want to talk to them right now. And if you do, you're not sure you might like what gets said out of your own mouth because it puts you in an emotional place instantly when something like that occurs. So if you want your children to be able to maintain emotional strength, which is one of the things self-government is about, then we have to make sure that we are emotionally safe, which means we have to understand the cause and effect in the way that we are dealing with our children and teaching and correcting our children, which is vital. So the second part of self-government is possessing a knowledge of your own behaviors so that you can control them. Okay, so that means that you're examining yourself on a regular basis. This is the hardest thing that we ever do, to look at ourselves and say, what is wrong with us? Probably this is one of the things that sets teaching self-government apart from any other parenting thing out there, is that we actually promote more than anything the parent fixing themselves, not trying to just get the kids to fix something they need to do. I don't think hypocrisy ever helps in any relationship. It just comes across as manipulation, and your children that are especially smart, which all of us have probably some of those, they know it. They know when they're getting manipulated and that hypocrisy is coming through. And so guess what? They just don't, they just disregard then everything that we are teaching them and talking about. So anyway, we have to examine ourselves and we have to say, this is what's wrong with me. What am I going to do about it? How am I going to make a change? In order to create this type of an environment where self-government can be taught, it takes a certain type of a tone, which is the feeling that you carry with you in your environment, and a certain type of a structure. Now, when we all examine our homes and we say, okay, what type of a home do we want to have? And we have our first baby and we're like, it's going to be perfect here. It's going to feel like love all the time. And I'm going to be so nurturing and understanding and no stress and all this kind of stuff. And that's our plan. We have this ideal picture in our mind of what it's going to be. And by the way, those ideal pictures are awesome. They point us in the right direction. So don't push those aside. Those are good things. We may not achieve them every day, but they are good things. They help us raise the bar for ourselves, which helps improve our own self-government. Now, the thing we don't do is we should not get stressed when it doesn't turn out perfect. That would be a bad thing to do, right? We shouldn't be putting that much pressure on ourselves. But anyway, there's this feeling that we want. Well, most people focus on the feeling, and sometimes they use that intention for that feeling to manipulate things. Well, I'll just let them get away with that because I want it to feel friendly. I want us to be best friends. I want, and so they're going that direction, and they totally omit the need for the second thing in order to create a self-governing environment. Also needs structure. So you've got to have both of those things. So the structure is that system of how you put things together. Now, I don't know if any of you have read this book. I'm probably going to do a couple of quotes out of it today, but it's called Cheaper by the Dozen. I am not recommending everybody go read this book, but it's often a book that people know about because there was movies made about Cheaper by the Dozen and stuff. Although those movies are not the same. The same family. This is very old-fashioned, very antiquated, but it's interesting. And what we see in here is we see this family that is systematized, okay? And some people might even say to a fault, systematized. It's like, okay, this is what happens. Dad says this, everybody does this. He even has whistle calls and whatever, which I think is a little extreme. But anyway, they have a system. The point is they have a system. In fact, they do have a lot of flaws in this book. I want to make sure that's very clear. I'm going to mention the book multiple times. These are not the type, I would not agree with everything that these parents do. But they also were in a different age. They had 12 children, and this is a true story. So this Gilbreth family, actually, this was their life story. And that's the part that everybody loved about the book, is this family that had 12 children. How did they have 12 children and create such amazing people? Well, this is how they did it. Well, they didn't have some of the same challenges we have today. They also didn't have the psychological view of society that we have today. So that is something that we all have to deal with. We have a bit of a psychology lens that everybody looks through. In fact, to the point that everybody makes excuses for every bad behavior under the sun, because there's all of this psychology out there that, quite frankly, a whole bunch of it, a good percentage of it, is just theory. But we just grab it because it will become oh, well, that's just common, that's just common knowledge. Everybody knows that thing. And in reality, that's just somebody's guess. So we get a little bit of a hang up. We have decreased some things like the ability to launch. A lot of children don't have the ability to launch like they used to have, because we aren't systematized enough, because we haven't created a strong enough structure for our older children. We haven't prepared them to get into adulthood. We have delayed adulthood. We have increased childhood more and more and more and more and more years over time. And this is just a social construct that we have done, and everybody's in on it. The government's in on it, the schools are in on it, like the neighbors are in on it. Everybody's in on it. The insurance companies are in on it. You can insure your child now until they're like 26 or so. That's not a child anymore. You know what I mean? Like everybody just is like, yeah, but they're still kids until, whatever. And so we're just not growing people up. Anyway, we're not putting in the framework that people need. So we're going to be talking about tone and structure today. Both of those elements, how they apply to creating a self-governing environment for our children. So we have to have both of those things to harness that power within us to control ourselves. This power to control ourselves is missing today, is as evidenced by a couple of things that I just mentioned. Our children not being able to launch properly. And I'm not saying that all your families are in that boat, but many are. And I know probably every single one of us knows at least one family where the child is, or their kids don't get a driver's license. They don't want to date. They don't want to whatever. And there's a lot of fears, tons of fears, because there's wildness that is out there today. I heard a devastating story last night. My niece has a friend who was just murdered because she broke up with her boyfriend. Devastating. I'm like, well, where are we at? And apparently where they live, in Las Vegas area, there is like this string of just killings of girls in the cars and just like what happened to this girl. And I'm like, look at the fears, look at the things we're dealing with. It's no wonder that our children are like, I don't know if I want to date, like that seems scary because, well, what if you go on a date with somebody, then everybody thinks you're a thing. Because now that's a thing. You can't just randomly just test waters with people and go on dates. Now everybody says that means you're an item, right? And so that's a hard thing for somebody to deal with. And if you're an item that fast, then what happens if you break up with the person and they're not emotionally stable? Because they haven't been nurtured properly, because they don't know how to accept no answers, because they're emotionally driven in every single thing that they do. Wow, then we end up with quite a problem in our society. So we have a lot of empowerment that is missing. We feel like victims, most of us in society today, like everything is happening to us. And our children don't know if they should step out or if they should hide, and this is a really interesting time. I don't know if there has been a time in society, and I'm just throwing this out there as a Nicholeen Peck guess, so for what it's worth, but I do not know if there's been a time in our society, at least or in the history of the world, at least that I've studied in history, which I've studied a lot of, where the people have had so much fear and so much feelings of so much inabilities, not being able to do anything, not wanting to step out, not wanting to take responsibility, not wanting to, get jobs and do things. I don't think there's ever been a time like this. And I think it would be wise for a society to look at its people and say, how did we get to this place? What has occurred in the family unit? And if you could ask yourself that question, maybe just jot it down. What has entered the homes? What has entered family life in recent years that could possibly have led to this change, so that now parents are no longer able to adequately empower their children, that even though their children still have parents, the child does not feel that they are equipped or ready for life and that someone needs to always take care of them. How did we get that helpless as a society? Anyway, so ask yourself those questions and write down maybe some of those things. You're probably right, because there's a multiple different things that I can think of, a couple that would have more of an impact than others. All right, so people who have the ability to govern themselves have a significant advantage over those who are at the whim of every social or emotional current, okay, and being controlled by just everything that's happening around them. If you're controlled by everything that's happening around you, you are completely out of control. You don't have any control then. That's important. The people that make excuses, yeah, well, so-and-so did this to me, well, so-and-so, then you are out of control. Yes, things are going to happen to you. People are going to do things to you, sometimes horrible things to you. But you have to empower yourself enough to go, but how can I be okay in this? How can I get past this? How can I solve this? That's what it means to be self-governing. There's a strength that comes with that. And I've noticed as my children are reaching adulthood, so we've got 2 that are adults, I've noticed that they are different than their peers that reach adulthood. They have a different kind of a confidence. In fact, they'll contact me and say, oh, Mom, my roommates, they've been asking me how to handle a problem with their parents or how to handle a problem with whatever. This is what I said. Do you think I gave them good advice? And I'll be like, yeah, that was really good advice. Or occasionally I might add a little something. People are coming to my children to solve their problems. Why? Because my children don't have as many problems. Because they're stronger. And I don't say that to boast, but that's what happens when you teach your children how to govern themselves. They find strength, and we're going to talk about how to do that today. Okay, so people who govern themselves, they have some advantages. Here's some of their advantages. Number 1, they see more truth. Okay, if you know self-government, you see more truth. Number 2, they are not as easily manipulated. Why are they not as easily manipulated? Because they see more truth. There you go. And you're not as easily manipulated when you have conquered your own manipulations to yourself. So if you are not allowed to make excuses and just live by those excuses, then you are not going to allow anybody else's excuses to hold any weight for you either. You're going to say, that doesn't mean we shouldn't be compassionate. Sometimes people are going to make an excuse and you're going to say, oh, I'm sorry about that. In your mind, it's just an excuse, but you're not going to go correct every person under the sun that tells you an excuse, right? You're going to be compassionate, be kind. Then we have to teach them how to do that. But for the most part, they're going to just be able to identify, oh, they're making an excuse. Maybe they don't want to handle that problem yet or whatever it happens to be. But they're going to see the truth in the situation. It's like somebody clears away the curtains so that they have the full view of the window, unlike some other people who are trying to look through the cracks, right? People who govern themselves are great leaders. They make great leaders. Those are the kinds that we want. So when I look at, somebody I'm going to vote for or something like that, or somebody that I'm going to follow or a book that I'm going to read, I want to know they've had a change. I want to know that something has significantly occurred in their life that has led them to more truth, more understanding, that they have an ability to see things honestly. Okay, so that makes the greatest leaders. People who make excuses are not very good leaders because they just manipulate others. So if you want your children to make a positive impact in the world, even if it's just a positive impact with your future grandchildren, then they need to see the truth, which means that you need to also be able to see the truth. Okay, so everyone who learns self-government will end up zeroing in on what is good. What is good? Is that good or is that bad? Because when you learn cause and effect, which is, as you will remember, is part of the definition, then you zero in on, oh, okay, So this cause and effect has told me or shown me that this is good. This is the way that I should be going. And so they develop more of an allegiance to goodness. They go searching for goodness. And they want to follow and do what is good because they have had experience examining the bad. Children who are not corrected regularly will not find the good as easily. It is our job to make sure that they find the good, which means that even though it takes more work, we have to continually be consistent in our corrections as well as in our praises that we give our children. That helps them learn cause and effect. So people who govern themselves are more free. That's a big thing because when you have self-awareness, you are more free. You don't need to feel in bondage because of yourself. You're continually conquering yourself, which empowers you, which gives you more and more and more freedom. People who govern themselves are more productive. That's a real thing. When you're able to conquer yourself again and again and empower yourself again and again, then you start thinking, there's nothing I can't do. There's nothing I can't try. And so then a person is just a better producer. In this world, we are either creators and producers or we are consumers. The way that everything is structured in education, in politics, in all of our social services, in everything is customer is king, right? So what that means is we have a consumer society. A consumer society. When you have a consumer society, your people lose productivity because consumers become the hierarchy and everyone sees themselves as hierarchy. Oh, I'm the most important one because I'm going to spend money. And because everybody can get some money, and everybody can spend some money, then everybody inflates their own importance and stops examining themselves and what they can accomplish. Instead, they just worry about what they can get from other people. This is a type of tyranny, and every one of us gets sucked into it. So people who are self-governing are more productive. Why? Because they have been crafting and creating who they are for many, many years. And they fine-tune and they adjust and they throw out pieces. They're not afraid to move themselves in a forward direction. So in everything, they then will say, okay, wait a second, let's analyze this. Let's look at the system and the structure, what needs to adjust. In fact, that's probably one of my greatest skills that I have is being able to see a system or to see a form or a structure in front of me. It's probably somewhat how my brain was, but I also think a lot of it has to do with how I was raised. So my parents just pushed us forward. No, you can do this, Nicholeen. What do you think? They'd talk us through it. They'd teach us the skills that we needed. By the time I was a very young girl, I could sit and pair the pears, put them in the jars, can them, do the whole bit, make the dinners when my mom went back to work, when she needed to, when my youngest sister went to school. I was in charge of all the meals. And I just made everything. That's what I did. And they had no problem giving that responsibility to me because they knew that it would be for my good. Now, can I say that I always didn't have a problem having that responsibility? No. I mean, sometimes it was fun, but sometimes I was like, ugh. But when I hit motherhood and marriage and everything else, was I super glad that I had been given that responsibility every night and to care for my siblings and stuff like that? Oh yeah, absolutely, because it wasn't that hard for me then. So sometimes we protect the child completely out of developing any skills, which is not good. We need to create productive people. People who self-govern themselves are also more empowered. Like I said, they're more joyful. They have better relationships. Because if you don't have to make excuses for your behaviors all the time, then what you're going to do is you're going to focus your attention instead of on yourself, on that other person and understanding that other person better. If you're not justifying for yourself all the time. When we spend our time justifying, we don't spend our time connecting. The two can't happen at the same time. And so we need to remember that. And then finally, people who govern themselves have more successes in life, and they have more contentment in their life. There's just a feeling of like, it's okay. I'm not worried. You know, people have said, oh, what would happen if the whole, society crashes and everything, and, we can't get to the stores, or we can't, some big disaster happens. And I thought to myself, then our family will just carry on as usual. We'll go out to the yard. We'll weed things. We'll pick things. We'll go to our storage area where we have all our stuff from last year from the yard, and we'll take it and we'll use it and we'll eat it and we'll cook it and we'll grow it, and we'll just do everything ourselves, just like we always have. There's no fear. So we just have this peace that comes. People have this, for years and years, from the time I was a little child. Oh, what do you want for Christmas? And someone would always say, world peace. Well, world peace only comes from a very capable, self-governing people. You can't get world peace. You cannot inflict world peace on someone. It doesn't happen. Okay? You can only accomplish your own peace. That's it. And of course, we can bring religion into this on peace, right? Okay, as well. But that is really something that everyone wants nowadays. Everyone's so stressed and worried about things. They need contentment in their life. They need that peace. And no one can give that to them. So we need to make sure that our focus is for that for our children. So when it seems hard to correct more problems, to do more training, it seems like it takes more time, because this type of parenting is the long view parenting. This is not a quick fix or a trick. Although some people will start using the skills, and I know there's probably some people on here who could say, oh yeah, that happened to my family, that you start using the skills and you're like, holy cow, within like one afternoon, like things were so different. Yes, but for the full distance of self-government to occur, it is a long view. It is thing after thing after thing, correcting again and again, teaching again and again, staying calm again and again and again. Anything that's worth it, that's how we learn it. So self-government, basically, if you haven't found out by now with our little understanding of self-government, is all about having a change of heart. So it's all about you going, who is it that I'm really supposed to be? Right now I've just been reacting to this, but who am I really supposed to be? And then centering in on that, and maybe even just having a glimpse of who they could become. So maybe you know someone, maybe it's just me, but maybe it's somebody else in your life too. You've said, I want that quality. I want to be able to be like that person. And you need to be that in the lives of your children. You don't exactly know how you're going to get all of it yet, but you know that if you get on the same track that they are on, that then you have a chance of getting there. That is what is required for a person to have a full change of heart. They've got to have somebody helping them find the right track again and again and again. So some people think I'm a little bit harsh with how blunt I am about things that are happening around us. And maybe they think I'm not as sensitive when I talk about people making excuses and stuff like that. But I feel like that it is my job in all of your lives and in everybody else I know to say, this is the track. Get on the track. Because we won't get there unless we choose to take that specific journey. So I love trains, and there's a lot of works and stuff like that. And I think I love trains so much because Porter loved trains so much. I mean, he was like a Thomas the Train crazy when he was little. But I think it started even before then. I had this little book. It was one of those little golden books, when we were children, and it was The Little Engine That Could. You remember that story? So there's the little engine, well, first there's the what is it, the red engine. First, the red engine, he's got all of these toys and food, and they need to go up the mountain to bring them to these children who live on the other side of the mountain. And they're out of coal. So their train can't work, and all the little toys are worried about the children and getting everything to the children and that kind of stuff. And even though it's a funny premise, I mean, I think it resonates with little children. Anyway, so they ask other people, well, not other people, other trains, who are very powerful trains, will you please take us over the mountain? Because we have to get ourselves toys and this food to these children who are over the mountain. They need it. They're good little children. And these other engines that they ask are like, no, I don't care. Right? And then they ask this little tiny engine. She's got some coal in her little back, and she's the little blue engine, and she's called the little engine that could. And they ask her and they say, will you help us? And she says, well, I've never been over the mountain before, but I guess, I'll try. And so she hooks up, she goes up the mountain, and what does she say to herself? I think I can. I think I can. I think I can. And she goes up that mountain, and then at the end she makes it over. She's like, I thought I could. And so basically what she is doing is something that every person needs to do if they are going to get on the right track. They go, well, let's see, where's the track to where I want to go? That's it. I want to go up over the mountain. I feel that it's important to get these things to those children over the mountain. That's what she wanted. Well, for us, we say, or for our children, they say, hopefully, where do I want to go? Where do I want to end up at the end of this? And then we get on the track. And once we're on the track, then we struggle a bit. She couldn't have had to say, I think I can, if it was easy. She struggled. It was hard. It was heavy. She'd never done it before. That's the way learning self-government feels for parents. It's the way learning self-government feels for children. It feels like this is hard. But in the end, she trusted that it was possible, though, because other trains had done this. The red train had done it before. It was just out of coal. So surely, if other trains had done it, even though she was small and had never done it before, she could try to do it too. That is the approach a person takes when they are experiencing a change of heart. They aren't perfect at first, but they think, I know this is possible. I know I can do it. And they look usually to an example for that assurance that they can do it, that it is possible. And who is the example that they are going to be looking to? Well, the answer is you. You have to be that example, which comes to the bad news about self-government, which is that you have to learn self-government. If you haven't gathered that so far, in order for your children to master themselves, you have to also be learning self-government for yourself. Okay, so this engine, the act of willing herself to the top despite her challenges, is what all great people do. That's how they accomplish great things. That's how every racer, every athlete, every woman in childbirth, okay, every person who does a heroic deed, that's how they do it. They go, I know it can be done. It's been done before. Ladies, you don't have to shake your heads and let us know, but like, if you're like me, there was a point, especially when it was like the first child I'm pregnant with. I'm like, well, I don't really know what's going to happen here. But people have done it, like a lot. People have done it a lot. So I know since people have done it a lot that I can do this. And guys, I'm not going to share birth stories. Okay? So don't worry. We're not going to that place. But that's something that I don't know if we realize. Of course, we make it easier on ourselves, maybe. I guess you can debate that, with different medical and modern advances and stuff like that. But we actually still have to go to that place. I mean, women have always been honored because they go to the valley of the shadow of death. You know, that's what they call it, in order to bring a child into the world. But that's because she knows she can. She knows her body's built for it. It can do it. Everybody else's body has been able to do it. She can do it. And so she just takes the leap, and it's called faith. And she does it. And that's how every great thing is done. And we need to instill in our children that they can do that with everything, with accepting no answers. They can accept a no answer, even in the hardest circumstance. They can disagree appropriately with a person, even if they feel incredibly emotionally charged about something. They can. They can. That's where it all begins, is in the little teeny day-to-day minutes. They build courage, they build strength as we give them instruction after instruction, no answer after no answer, correction after correction, and they get the opportunity to accept those corrections and consequences. So we need to prepare their hearts for this type of a change. All of the lessons in self-governing apply to everyone in the family, and our hearts as well as their hearts have to be in the right place in order to become a self-governing people. So I want you to ask yourself, what direction is your heart right now tuned toward? And if you've got a piece of paper or something to jot it down, maybe in your phone, just thinking of it is good, but if you write it down, it's probably good. What is your heart tuned toward? Is it tuned toward yourself? Be honest. Do you care too much about what you think? Is your heart tuned toward others? Do you just want to please others all the time? Please, please, please others. Is your heart tuned toward evil? I mean, I think most of us would say no. Is it tuned toward opposition, though? Because tuning your heart toward opposition is you actually being in such a selfish place that you kind of cross over that line into being tuned toward evil, even though you may not even be aware of it. I think a lot of people would not be aware. I think the majority of people do not just go, I want to be evil. Okay. Although it does concern me. I don't know if you've noticed this. This is even in all the Disney programs and everything. We are really fascinated right now with glorifying the villain. Have you noticed that with all of the movies? Does it bug you too? Because it bugs me. So we're giving the villain a backstory, and we're giving the villain excuses for why they can be a villain. That doesn't give a very good message to our children or to our young adults or to anyone, because basically that says, well, everyone's got an excuse for why things, why they're not as perfect as somebody else, and they actually make the princess or the perfect person, the quote unquote perfect person in the original Disney into the villain, like I know, like in Maleficent, look what they did to the king and queen who were the original victims. They are now not the victims, they're now the villains, and Maleficent is the victim, right? Even though she does this horrible thing. So what they've done is they've actually bent the story, and to give a child a bent story is like actually really damaging to their psyche. So anyway, this is what we're doing. And everyone's walking around wearing devil horns on their head and thinking that means that they're on the good side. That's being bent or tuned in to having our heart tuned toward the wrong direction, and it could, we could not even know that it's happening. And then, is your heart tuned toward goodness? Tuned toward goodness. So if I could just get personal for a quick second, when I ask myself this question, the answer is absolutely yes. I have my heart tuned toward goodness. I know that. I know that because I literally wear myself out every day thinking, what can I do to help that person? How can I make the world a better place today? What work can I invest myself into? What can I study to make myself a better person, to help other people, to help my children, to help my neighbor, to help my family? What can I do? I'm hearing somebody unmuted themselves. I'm not sure who. There we go. Okay. Anyway, so how have you tuned your heart? These ways that you tune your heart are actually called your allegiances. Okay. So the way that you point your heart, whether it's toward yourself and toward how you feel and your comforts, your pleasures, your desires, with our consumer society tries to groom us to have an allegiance to self. Okay? That's where the allegiance is supposed to end if you're a really good consumer. And even in popular psychology, people will be like, oh yeah, it's all about you, do something good for you, da 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 da, and it's all about pleasuring yourself again and again and again. And because of that mindset, we also have now this mass sexualization movement for the children. I'm not going to go into great detail there. I've studied it for years, and it's very concerning. But we're now pushing sexual behaviors on children through sex programs at school and different things because we think that life is about pleasuring yourself, and that's just another aspect of it. And I'm not saying that all of you here think that, but just by and large, that is the general rule. So when you bring up something like, well, I don't think we should sexualize children, they think you're a conservative radical. And I'm like, well, actually, I just think that there's a process that children learn things, but they say, no, you know what? People have sexual rights and children have sexual rights, and everyone needs to be able to experience this sexual pleasure at any time. Super concerning. Anyway, that's allegiance to self. So every day, do you see yourself worrying about what you get, what you didn't get, what you need, or do you see yourself finding absolute joy in any improvement you have for the people around you or for yourself? Because if that's the case, then you have an allegiance to goodness. If you're a God-fearing person, you might be interested to know that the word good actually comes from the Latin root for God, and it actually means godlike or living the way God would have you. That's the whole point of what the word good means. And so when you say, oh, it's such a good little boy, that is a really intense compliment, actually, to give to somebody. So I don't just throw the word good around just willy-nilly because of what it means. Anyway, so you need to know about your allegiances, and then maybe ask yourself, what allegiances do my children have? Do my children have an allegiance to self, an allegiance to others, which would look like what? An allegiance to their peers. Okay, like, oh, I got to do everything my peers do, and I got to make my peers happy. I can't let my peers down. I've got to fit in with my peers. That would be others, okay? And a lot of online stuff. They got to be part of the online world. That's an allegiance to others, okay? Or are they having an allegiance to opposition, which could maybe be evil? Are they having an allegiance to goodness? Or is there a mix? There could be a mix at different minutes, right? That could happen to a person. And usually that mix occurs when a person knows they've been trained about goodness. They know they should be having an allegiance toward goodness, but yet they get caught up in these selfish things. I mean, we all have feelings, like our body has them. So what are we going to do with all of those feelings? We either indulge them and give them like a high position in our life, or we say, okay, that's part of us, but where ought I to be spending my time? On, getting a pedicure, or not the pedicures are bad, but I'm just saying, are we gratifying all of that every day, or should we be spending our time instead going, what can I teach a person today? How can I better influence the world today? Anyway, so don't feel bad if you analyze your children and you see that they have allegiance to themselves more than allegiance to goodness, because that actually is very natural for young children. So we need to recognize that that is part of who they are. In fact, their selfishness sometimes keeps them safe. So parents sometimes go, they're just thinking about themselves. They're being so selfish, and this annoys us because we feel like we want their hearts to be in the right place. Now, I hope you know that putting your heart in the right place is a procedure. It's a process that happens over time. It's not like an instant fix in 1 minute. There are occasional occurrences, but usually it's always in adults where a person will have an amazing moment. Maybe it's a spiritual moment or something, and all of a sudden their heart is transformed. But that is very, very rare, and especially for children. Children have to practice something, test it again and again and again. That's the way that they learn. That's the way that their brains are wired to learn. And so don't feel bad if they seem like they're selfish. In fact, children Oftentimes we get worried about things like, oh, that could hurt me. I don't want to do it. And parents will get annoyed. They're like, no, just do it. You can try. It's fine. Look, other people are doing it. It's okay. And the child's like, I don't know. I don't know. This is actually something that should not frustrate parents at all. Okay, because that doesn't mean that we give in to the child's fears. We do need to help them overcome those fears. However, the way we do it is important. We need to make sure that we have a supportive attitude through this whole thing, that we are understanding where they're at. In their minds, they are worried about keeping themselves safe. They have this selfish view of life that is for self-preservation. They're tiny. They're vulnerable. And I know some of you are thinking, man, I've got this 4-year-old who needs that. He is all over the place. I hope he makes it to age 5, right? Like, there are a few kids that don't have that. But for the most part, children have that. And they're worried about things, which is why they whine and they hide in mommy's shoulder. And they're not sure about meeting new people and some of the new things that we try to get them to do. And sometimes we push too much on them too quickly. And so we need to realize that, actually. Anyway, so we need to be constantly reaching toward our child's heart, okay, and their mind to guide their allegiance toward goodness. This allegiance training has to happen throughout our entire lives, okay, and it is possible for a person
Well, I didn't have it all the way on my ear.
Oh, we need to have somebody push mute. Thank you. Okay. Anyway, what was I saying?
Sorry, I'm on it, Nicholeen, when those happen.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
One thing is, for some reason, your audio is fluctuating in volume a little bit. I don't know why.
Maybe this thing is like waving back and forth. Maybe I should hold it.
I don't know, but for some reason, it's like louder at some moments and then quieter. I don't know. It's kind of weird, but.
Sorry.
Okay.
I don't actually know what to do about it. This is my head TV. So anyway, I will try. Maybe I will just hold this little thing to make it a little bit easier. Is that any better? Or doesn't even matter?
I don't know if it makes a difference, but
okay.
Some people are saying it's not. They're not hearing it, so it might just be a few of us. So anyway.
Okay. Sometimes it could just be the transmission that you're getting, right? Like that can happen.
Exactly.
Okay, so we're in the middle of talking about allegiances. We're just about done here, but it is possible for a person to have a good allegiance when they're young and then change allegiances when they're older. I think that's important for us to understand. Sometimes we can think, oh, this child is good. I have done all the training. They really have a desire to do good. And they can leave the home and they can get influenced still in college and with peers and just society at large, in the workplace, stuff like that. And they can alter their allegiance. So a person can change allegiance at any time. So don't feel like that you have failed if you thought you raised a child that was good and they leave the home and they change their allegiance and it's all towards self and or toward being oppositional. And now all of a sudden they're opposing you and telling you did everything wrong. And I know parents come to me and they'll say, I worked really hard. I homeschooled my children. I did all this stuff. We were religious. We did all these things. And now all of a sudden my child is coming back at me and attacking me. And really, if I could just give a message to any parent out there that's like that, that doesn't mean you did anything wrong. That just means that there's a lot stacked against us. And hopefully, in the end, the truth will win out, right? That's what every parent has to hope for, even if a child hits that stage when they hit adulthood and they aren't at the place that you wish they were because they get influenced by society in a negative way. Then you have to remember that there's a point where life becomes empty when you're trapped in a device or a digital world, or there's not enough meaning, and people will start looking for meaning again, and they'll go back to what felt good in their childhood. So it's never lost. Your efforts are never lost, even if a child happens to use their free will to go against you at a time. So even though I do all this work for my children, I'm not saying that they're going to turn out perfect. They have done great, but that doesn't mean that there won't be bumps along the way. They're people, they're humans, they're not robots. And okay, we're all a little bit robots because we program ourselves. But anyway, and we're going to talk about how to better program ourselves and our children today. So I want to talk about the 4 T's of self-government. We're going to go over these fairly quickly because we are going to discuss them more in detail as we go through each age category that we'll be discussing today. So the 4 T's of self-government that need to be considered at every stage of development are: number 1, training. So training is instruction that helps a person reach their full potential. In the Greek lexicon, the word training means to strangle and to inaugurate. Now, we're not talking about strangling our children. This would be a very bad parenting program if we talked about that. And I mean around the neck, but we are talking about strangling our children with boundaries, with expectations, with skills that they need to develop. So that's what the strangle means. Strangle means to give parameters. Okay, so that means they have to have no answers. And I often think of it like a little tree. So when you plant a little tree where I live, okay, that it's windy here. Okay, we're out like in between 2 mountain ranges in this valley, and the wind whips through. And if you don't put like tiebacks on the tree to hold it in its place, then it's going to grow sideways. That's just what the tree does. And so that is strangling the tree, okay? And that's what we need to give to our children. We need to give them, where's the place that we stop? What are the things that we should be doing? How can we grow properly? And we give them boundaries for that growing. And then the inauguration. So to inaugurate a person means to point them in the right direction. Okay, so when a person graduates, from school or whatever, they have like an inauguration kind of thing that happens with a graduation commencement, okay, where it's like, now where are you going? Okay, where you're going in this direction. So there are different times in our life where we naturally think of inaugurating a person. That somebody hits a certain age and we say, oh, or we say, well, when you're this age, when you're this age, when you're this age, and we will point towards certain things. Well, a wise parent thinks in terms of inaugurating more, not less. So what you do is you say, okay, well, what type of a family do we want to have? What type of a relationship do we want to have? What do you want to accomplish in your life? And so we're going to be talking about more and more things and making plans for more and more things. And that's what any wise parent does. If you want your child to be a great musician, then guess what you do? You take them to a lot of concerts, classical concerts of great musicians. And then you get them in touch with a trainer, a person that can give them the strangling that they need, right, for that process. But it's seeing those concerts and being exposed again and again to those great masters that are the things that helps the child go, I want to become that. I love that sound. I love that instrument. I love it. That's what pushes them in that direction. Your children never love music if you only turn on the radio. And I'm talking good music. Okay, when I say music, there's like music, and then there's like just what people listen to me. Anyway, so there's if you don't expose them to great things, then they struggle, right? And I'm not saying that there's not, some awesome music out there. Okay, so anyway, training. This training requires vision. So in my program, we talk about creating a family vision. So this is a 20-year view into the future of who your family is becoming. It's a picture that you paint and you create for your family. Where are we going? Who do we want to be? And I think a lot of people think it's silly. They think, okay, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to make a fake picture of who we're becoming in the future. And they just think it's awkward, right? And to like present it to the children, it's awkward. Because, we are not that much of a planning society anymore. People used to be more visionary than they are now. People used to look ahead and go, where's this going? And we were more big picture oriented. Nowadays, everybody is so detail oriented, and a lot of that has to do with our consumer culture and our self allegiance that we all have. When you're wrapped up in self-allegiance, you only think about each little individual comfort or feeling at any given minute. And so what happens is you lose that forward thinking. So if you create a vision for your children and with your children of where your family is going, okay, we're going to learn this self-government. We're going to have these, 20 some odd years as we're raising people. And then after that, we're going to be this family. What are we going to be at the end of all this? After all of this, what are we going to be? We got to know what we're doing. Otherwise, what's the point? If you don't know where you're going as a family, then each little thing that you want to feel or do seems like the number one most important thing at the minute, because there's nothing else bigger that you've ever been presented. So anyway, you want to give that to your children. And when you give them that vision, then they get a focus, and you get unity that develops as a family. And this focus and this unity that they have with the family actually leads to personal value. So I don't know if you've been watching all the talk that happens online and everywhere about how everybody feels bad about themselves all the time. Have you noticed how everybody is like into depression and feeling bad? And now, I mean, it's almost like if you don't have depression, like you're left out. You better just say you do, because like everybody, and I'm not saying like depression's a real thing, but people are just throwing it around like it's the latest trend, and everybody's feeling like they're not good enough for everything, and they're blaming things. Oh, well, I'm not good enough, and so it must be this government's fault, this church's fault, school's fault, it's whatever's fault, because I don't feel good enough about myself. Well, when you know where you're going and you have unity with your family in a common direction, then guess what happens? You know you're important, even if you're not perfect. It's the family that gives you that. Now, do I think we've gone off base on some things and has our Facebook, Instagram world made people think they have to come across perfect? Yes, it's dangerous. There's all that kind of stuff that we're dealing with. But if we focus more of our attention into where our family's going, then we'll find the personal value that we need. That's really what's missing, is we're focusing too much attention outside of the family, even when we're posting our pictures of the family on social media. So keep that in mind. Just a quick story I wanted to share with you as far as inauguration goes and that vision for the future. So I don't know if any of you have seen the BBC program that I was in. So there was a BBC, they called it a documentary. It was a reality TV show that was made 10 years ago of our family. There was 2 British teens that the BBC brought to our house to film this program called The World's Strictest Parents. Now, I know that sounds a little fricky, but strict actually means a person who governs themselves by their principles that they believe in. And so we actually probably were the strictest parents who were on the program. Anyway, they brought us these 2 teens. There was a boy and a girl. They were both 17 years old. And James, who was the boy that came, we asked him, okay, well, where's your life going? Like, if you picture yourself in the future, so he's 17. So we thought, well, let's look ahead, like maybe 20 plus years. We said, okay, how about you picture yourself at 40? What do you want your life to be like when you're like 40 years old, right? Because I'm trying to help them get this idea of like, well, I've got to start making plans for my life. I'm 17. I've dropped out of school. I'm into drugs and all kinds of things. I've got to make a change. I'm trying to help him get this long-term view of his life. So I say that, and I said, what do you want your life to be like when you're 40 years old? And he says, I want to be dead. Never heard that response. Never, ever. And he said, yeah. He's like, I'll be all wrinkly and I won't be worth anything because I'll be so ugly. And he's like, so I might as well just be dead. I'm like, whoa, I'm 44. How am I doing? I don't know. Anyway, and so it really took me back. I thought, really? He has no value for himself. He saw no value in himself beyond his appearance. That was it. So by the end of the TV program, they ask him, so what's all this about? And he says, family. It's all about family. He went back home and he fixed his relationship with his mom and his siblings. He went back to school and he ended up getting a degree that he planned to get in our home. He's working in the industry. He moved to London where he wanted to live. He is a happy person. And he's a lot older now. That was 10 years ago. So he's 27 and he's still happy. And he probably has some wrinkles, but he seems like he's okay with it now. Very interesting. He saw himself instead as part of a family, and that was more important than what he looked like. And so he could make a change. All right. So then the second part, of course, of training is the skills that we're going to teach. That's the strangling that has to occur, right? The training that happens. So there are 4 basic skills that we teach. I'll just try to keep it pointed forward. I have these children's books that probably are not for your 15-year-old, okay? But these children's books, probably for children 12 and under, that teach the 4 basic skills. So this one teaches following instructions. This one teaches, well, where's the camera? Accepting no answers, accepting consequences. If a person doesn't accept their own consequences, they cannot learn self-government. And then this one teaches disagreeing appropriately. So those 4 skills take care of all of the self-government really that they would need. It takes care of 99% of all of our behavioral problems if we learn these skills and we can apply them in our life. Now, the goal is that a person will get to a place in adulthood or young adulthood where they are giving themselves instructions, giving themselves no answers, correcting themselves and accepting the consequences that come from their actions, and then also disagreeing appropriately with other people to be understood and to improve their problem solving and communication in the world around them. And even disagreeing appropriately with yourself. Listen, if you look in the mirror and you see just a little fat that you don't like or something, just disagree with yourself about it. You know, like, don't tear yourself down. Anyway, so how do these skills work? I'm going to go through them really quickly here. And we have all kinds of resources, cards and charts and books and things that people can use to learn these skills more. The training that we're going to do in October, we will train you on all these skills as well as all the parenting skills, which are important. So that we'll go into deep detail on those if you need more detail than what I'm going to be able to give here. So basically, the first skill is following instructions. You look at the person, you keep a calm face, voice, and body. You say okay, or you ask to disagree appropriately. You do the task immediately and then check back. So you look at the person to show that you are connected, that you are okay with that other person's role as parent giving you an instruction, perhaps. It shows you're teachable and that you're prepared to listen. So looking at the person is key because we want to unify the hearts during every interaction. Your eyes are the windows to your soul. They're the windows to your heart. And if you're feeling love for your children as you're instructing them and you teach them to always look at you when you're instructing them, then they will feel that love for you as well because it will come eye to eye, heart to heart, which is what we need to have happening. So anyway, you look at the person, you keep a calm face, voice, and body. This is something you have to teach your children. You have to teach them, what does calmness look like and what does it not look like? And you have to maybe even practice it, role play it so that they can see, oh, I can just not be calm whenever I want to, or I could just be calm whenever I want to, and teach them about that power they have. And then I use the term say okay. I like okay because okay tells me I'm okay. I'm okay with you being my parent, telling me something that I need to do or not to do or something like that. So saying okay is my preference. You could say whatever you want to. If you want to say yes, ma'am, yes, sir, something like that. I know some people, that's like a cultural thing where they live. Where we live, saying okay is a good thing. So that's what we use. I also like them to say okay because they know they're okay. And then they're telling me that they're okay too. So this helps them with the calmness a little bit more. And it also is a good, it's a deeper sound that comes with saying okay, because it comes from deeper inside the chest with the O sound, which is a little bit more calming as well. Then they do the task immediately. That's usually the part that we only care about. We need to care about all the other parts more than that part. They go do the task immediately. and then they check back. So if they're dawdling, they're not doing the task immediately, they need to be corrected. But before they even get to dawdling, if they didn't look at you, they didn't keep a calm face, voice, and body, and they didn't say okay or ask to disagree appropriately, then you need to correct them before they even get the chance to go and do whatever it is that you're instructing them to do. That's how it works, because that condition of heart is shown by being able to look at you, keeping a calm face, voice, and body, being able to say okay. And then at the very end of doing the task immediately, they come and check back to you. So it just looks like this. It's pretty simple. Hey, David, why don't you unmute your mic if you can? I don't know if you're handy right there.
Yeah.
Okay, so David, let's just do a little role play. David, I'm going to give you an instruction. And remember to follow an instruction. You look at the person, you keep a calm face, voice, and body. You say okay, or you ask to disagree appropriately. You do the task immediately and then check back. Here is your instruction. Now, what I just did was called a pre-teach. That is something that we do to help our children do better at the skills that we're teaching them to use, okay? So we pre-teach our children what's expected, they will succeed more. Pre-teaching and praising are the most important things that you can do, even though correcting consistently is vital. So, but the most important is the pre-teaching and praising, so don't forget that. Anyway, David, here's your instruction. I need you to tell me the step. Well, let's make it more simple than that. David, for your instruction, I need you to dust the curtain behind you, okay?
Okay. I did it.
Oh, good job, David. So you looked right at me. So now I'm going to praise David. This is called an effective praise. This is not just saying good job, but this is me describing to David what he did right so that he can learn cause and effect. Good job, David. You looked right at me. You kept a calm face, voice, and body. You said, okay. And then you did the task immediately. And then you said you did it. So you checked back. You showed me that you were able to do all 5 steps of following instructions. You're really getting good at following instructions, David. High five. Yeah. So then we would have a little high five minute. That is how following instructions works. If a child will not follow your instructions, you cannot parent them. You can't. Everything will just be an emotional battle if no one can follow instructions. It's that vital. So if a child cannot follow instructions, there is something we do called intensive teaching to help them get to a calm place where they are ready to do those 5 steps of following an instruction. It is that important. I'm not even going to waste my time talking to a child until I know that they can do all 5 steps of following an instruction. I mean, I'll talk to them about getting calm and I'll help them through that, but I'm not going to discuss an issue with them. I'm not going to debate something back and forth until everybody is in a calm place where we're getting the roles in the right place. If a child won't follow their instruction, they're putting themselves above their parent. That's called dysfunction. The roles need to stay in the right place, even if the parent isn't always right. The child has to learn to accept that no answer, that occasionally the parent may even be wrong. But that's why they have disagree appropriately. So David, let's do disagree appropriately on that same situation. So you can do a disagree appropriately with me. To disagree appropriately, you look at the person, you keep a calm face, voice, and body. And then you say that you understand the other person's point of view. Then you share your point of view. Then you listen to what the other person has to say, and you drop the subject. Okay? Drop the subject means you don't talk about it anymore. You don't pout about it. You don't walk out and hit the wall or, something like that. You just drop the subject. Now, he's going to ask me if he can disagree appropriately. And he knows that if he ever asks me, Mom, may I disagree appropriately? The answer is always going to be, yes, you may disagree appropriately. Unless he just asks to disagree appropriately about that same issue, then I will tell him no, because he gets one disagree appropriately about each issue. And sometimes the children don't know how to disagree appropriately, but they know they want to. We might have to tell them exactly what to tell us to change our mind. And that's okay to do. We have to teach them how to use that prefrontal cortex, which is the part that does that problem solving, which will help them do that disagreeing appropriately. Okay, David, let's try a disagree appropriately. So I just gave you the instruction. David, I need you to dust the curtains behind you, okay?
Okay, can I disagree appropriately?
Sure.
So I understand you want me to dust the curtains behind me. Just earlier today, we had some cleaners come in and they actually cleaned it already. And so I'm wondering if there is something else maybe that would be a better thing for me to do.
Oh, I'm so glad that you saw the cleaners dust the curtains today. I didn't know that's something that they were going to be doing since they're a new cleaner. So thank you for reminding me of that. Yeah, instead, for your instruction, I would like you to come and help me make the sandwiches for lunch, okay?
Okay.
Great. Good job on saying okay. So he got understood, right? He felt like he needed to share some information with me that I didn't know. And so he shared that information with me. Now, if I was giving him an instruction and he seemed kind of distressed about it right at the beginning, like, ooh, he couldn't body about this, I might say, now remember, you can always disagree appropriately. And I might think, what would he disagree appropriately about? And I could even feed him that information. If you told me, Mom, I know that you want me to clean the curtains, but I did that chore yesterday, and so I think it's actually already okay. Or that's actually so-and-so's chore today. Can I have a different chore? That kind of thing. Then I would actually probably change my mind and give you a different chore. And so then, David, what do you think he would immediately do if I told him that if he told me that, I would probably change my mind? He's going to disagree appropriately. So I'm going to help him go from that middle part of the brain, which is very emotional, to the front part of the brain, and do that disagree appropriately with me. Okay, so there's 2 other skills of the 4 basic skills that they need to learn. And one of them is accepting no answers. So that's a 4-step skill. You look at the person, you keep a calm face, voice, and body. You say okay or ask to disagree appropriately, and then you drop the subject. Now you see, with disagreeing appropriately and following instructions, we've actually already covered all the steps in accepting no answer. We're just organizing them now in a different way. So you look at the person, keep a calm face, voice, and body, say okay or ask to disagree appropriately, just like you did in following instructions, but this time you drop the subject. So this is what happens when somebody cuts you off in traffic. You look at the situation, you keep a calm face, voice, and body, and you say, okay, and then you just stop thinking about it and you just keep driving. You don't hold on to it and tell people about how people cut you off, and you don't give hand signs out the window and yell and try to make people crash into your bumper and all that other kinds of stuff that people do, right? Because that would be us not dropping the subject and certainly not keeping a calm face, voice, and body. Well, with our children, that would mean that they don't go whining. They don't go in, like when mom says no, they don't then go talk to dad about it because he's more of a pushover or something, or vice versa. They just call it done. They don't bring it up day after day after day. They just call it done. You just have to accept it, that no answer, drop the subject. It's super simple. David, how about you ask me a question? And it doesn't, by the way, it's not always somebody asking a question. Sometimes things just don't go your way. Okay. Sometimes somebody's playing with a toy that you want to play with, but you left it out. And so you can't just control what everybody's doing. So you have to accept the no answer, drop the subject, and let them have a time with the toy, or something like that. Or maybe, whatever it happens to be, maybe you woke up late and so you're late for school, or whatever it is. Those are all no answers that you have to accept. Those are things that didn't go the way you wanted them to go. Okay, David, let's just do a question though. Ask me a question, and you can do all 4 steps of accepting a no answer. Go ahead.
And I just wanted to mention that, these skills are the same at every age, right? And even as an adult, really.
Yeah.
Right? These 4 basics don't really change depending on the age. Obviously, if they're small enough where they can't form the words, then you have to really simplify it. but as far as the skills, this doesn't change. What does change, where there's a big conversation going on in the chat right now, is when you get to the intensive teaching, when they're
and we're going to discuss that next, actually.
We'll get to that in a second.
Now, and here's the thing is I am actually still reviewing some stuff. I'm hopefully giving you also some new information, but then we're going to take everything that I'm reviewing right now. I changed the time formats that I originally said I would do things, because as I was putting it together, I thought I want to give the majority of the information through these 4 T's, and then we're going to take it and apply it to the different ages so that you can hopefully see the different ways that it will work differently for each individual age. Anyway, so David, go ahead and ask the question. Good comment, by the way. Thank you.
Okay, so Mom, can I go to the pool with my friends?
Oh, yeah, that would be really fun. But actually, no, today we can't, because today's a big yard work day. So I'm going to have to give you a no answer. No, you can't go to the pool with your friends.
Okay.
That's how it works. Or David could say, okay, may I disagree appropriately? If he whined, then I would go into a correction. And there's a certain way that we do corrections, and we'll talk about those in a minute. Then the last skill is accepting a consequence. So accepting consequences is vital if a person does not get the opportunity to accept their consequences, which means that they are calm, which means that they acknowledge, I earned this consequence. If they don't get that opportunity and things are just imposed upon them, then there will always be a battle between you and them. And that is not what you want to have occur. So in order to accept a consequence, you look at the person, you keep a calm face, voice, and body. You say, okay, or you ask to disagree appropriately. So those 3 are just the same in following instructions, accepting no answers, and accepting consequences. It's not the same in disagreeing appropriately. So after you say okay or disagree appropriately, then you do whatever consequence you've earned. Okay, so that's kind of like following an instruction. And then you check back from doing that and you drop the subject, which means you don't sit and talk again and again about how you shouldn't have to do this chore or whatever it is, or how you didn't do whatever. You just drop the subject and you move on. So it's kind of like taking following instructions and accepting no answers and combining them together. That's how you accept a consequence. Those 2 skills put together. We're going to do a role play for that one in a minute, okay? Not just yet, because we're going to move on to the next T. I just wanted to share, though, there was this set of twins, some 3-year-olds, who they were both little girls, and they had both developed the habit of whining for anything to get their way. Oh, Mom, all the time. And the mom was like, well, they're 3, so they whine. That's just how it is. And so she was just putting up with it, actually, and it wasn't getting any better. And then they started learning the 4 basic skills, and they started learning about calm face, voice, and body. And these little 3-year-olds just have stopped whining. They're just not doing it anymore. They feel so empowered that now they can just have a calm face, voice, and body, and they can be okay. It's amazing to see what they've been able to accomplish. Okay, so let's do number 2. The second T is tolerances. So tolerances, that means to tolerate, okay? What will you not restrain? Okay, when you tolerate something, that means you're not going to restrain it. You're going to permit it. You're going to allow it. Okay, what is it that you will allow or permit in your home? You have to know that. By the way, these 4 T's, just in case, this is kind of fun. This is actually the process usually that a person goes through as they master themselves. Okay, so a lot of people would like it to start with you just tell a person, oh, that's not the right thing to do. And they're like, oh, okay. And they just fix it and that's it. But usually they have to be trained on a skill. They have to recognize how to use the skill again and again and again. Then we get to tolerances, and the parents say, this is what I will allow. This is what is permitted. This is what is not permitted. Now there's always going to be some tolerances, especially depending upon the age of the child. So And when a child is younger and they don't have as much self-awareness, they will go to an emotional place more readily. Because that happens, you have to recognize that is going to be a quick trigger for them. So you're not going to go to some extreme negative consequence just because they all of a sudden start whining for a second. Instead, you're going to say, okay, you're whining. This is what we need to do. We need to go calm down. You will have trained them ahead of time. We're going to go to a calm down place. Whenever you're whining, mommy will say, we're whining. We need to go to the calm down place. And so then you will take them there. But you're not going to treat it like it's some major thing, even though it's emotional. And if your teen started doing it, you'd be like, what is with the attitude? And you would not, it would seem even bigger to you. Sometimes we make a small thing to a child seem big because we view it through an adult lens. And so we do tolerate some things because we realize, okay, well, that's just where they're at. That's their cognitive ability at this time. Okay. And the older they get, the lower the tolerances go. And then once they leave our home, we actually have to increase our tolerances again. Or once they are adults, we have to increase our tolerances because now they're their own person and we don't have control over what they do. And so we have to say, okay, this is what we will tolerate. So tolerances fluctuate a little bit over time, but the rule, and I usually just stick to the rule is keep them low. Okay, keep the tolerances low because people have a tendency to tolerate more and to keep their tolerances too high more than the people that keep their tolerances too low. Now, if you know you are a micromanager and a stressor and stuff like that, then probably your tolerances are pretty low tolerances, sometimes even too low, to the point where you're expecting them to not have human behaviors, okay? And for them to not be like 5, okay? They're 5. They're going to just blurt stuff out when you didn't want them to, okay? I mean, that's just how it is. So our tolerances, there is this happy place. It's on the low side. Okay, so we keep the tolerances low, but we do recognize that the tolerances are the main things that adjust when they are different ages. Okay, so will you tolerate your older child to be away from home more than your younger child? The answer is yes for me. Yes, when my child is home, is 4 years old, they are going to be with me all the time. I am not going to tolerate them being off out running around all the time. No. So I'm going to lower that tolerance there. But when my child is 4 years old and they, I don't know. What's a good thing? They really don't want to eat certain food, okay? And they're 4 years old versus 14 years old. At 14 years old, I'm going to say, that's just an instruction. You're just going to have to eat it. That's it, But when they're 4 years old, I'm going to say, okay, well, you're 4 years old, and so we're going to take 4 bites for as long as you're 4 years old. Of anything that you think you don't like, we're going to take 4 bites. And because I'm going to tolerate the fact that they have heightened sensitivities, their senses are just getting used to things, and because that's where they're at. Right? So we have to remember that. Sometimes we don't want to deal with it. We cannot process their world through our standard. We've got to make sure that we remember where they are. Okay, so now this is an important thing about tolerances that you always need to know. Our tolerances lead to their tolerances, okay? Remember that. Our tolerances lead to their tolerances. I'm going to say it one more time because it's super important. We have to lower our tolerances for ourselves. Our tolerances lead to their tolerances. Usually children end up tolerating more than their parents. Those are 2 truths that you need to know about tolerances. So if you decide that you're going to tolerate movies with all kinds of sex and whatever in them and bad words and all this kind of stuff, then when they hit young adulthood or adulthood, their movie selection is going to be a notch higher in the tolerances than yours. Higher meaning bad, okay? Going more toward bad. Okay, the foods that you will eat, the things that you will drink, the words that you will say, the judgments that you make of other people, okay, all of that stuff will increase a bit with each new generation, unless the child experiences a deep spiritual reformation of their own that then makes them lower their standard even lower than their parents because they want to improve upon where their parents were. That happens occasionally, and probably for some of you that are here with us talking about self-government, that actually has happened to you. Okay, so what I saw in my family is my parents had incredibly low tolerances, and then after all of us left their house, they just went whoop, like they were on vacation. They didn't need tolerances anymore. All of a sudden, it was like they were teenagers again, and all of a sudden, they weren't even being like having tolerances for themselves. And I went, whoa. And so then I just lowered mine. Like, even I'm like, no way, I am sticking to what I was raised with. And I'm even going to improve upon that. So because I was centered in on truth, I did that. And because I'm quite a spiritual person, I did that. But most people, most youth, by and large, that is not what happens to them. They will go slightly worse than their parents. So some of you that have graduated children out of your home, you've probably noticed that situation occurring. Okay, so in our society nowadays, we tolerate more laziness, we tolerate a bad work ethic, we tolerate time wasting, we tolerate, all kinds of stuff, living in a stressful way. So look at what we tolerate. Examine in yourself, what do you tolerate right now? Do you tolerate going, I'm stressed? Do you tolerate excuses? Do you tolerate lack of intelligence? Because we do in our society, just by and large, we tolerate ignorance. And in fact, we kind of like gratify someone for being not so smart. We tolerate dependency. We tolerate bad food, like junk food and stuff. We tolerate manners and, bad manners. And so if our manners we tolerate are not so good, then they're going to even have worse manners, and their children will even have worse manners. That's just what happens over time. So things kind of digress. Okay. We're more casual now than we used to be. The roles are more blurred, causing people to be less respected. Whenever the roles are blurred in a society, we have less respect in the society, and that means that we start tolerating more and more misbehavior in the society. And that's where we're at. So our tolerances as a people right now are really, really high. Just a little example of this casualness. I happened to be mentioning to a friend of mine who's 75 years old. This guy, I was talking to him about, me and my husband and when we were dating. So I was a sporty person. I really liked basketball and volleyball and stuff like that. And so one time we had a date where we were playing basketball, and we had a bunch of friends and we were all playing. And I was telling this guy how my husband came down from a rebound and his elbow hit my eye, and all of a sudden I had a black eye. And this guy, instead of laughing at this funny story, which a lot of people normally do when I tell the story who are part of my own generation, he actually looked kind of grave, kind of concerned. And he looked at me and he said, I would never have taken a girl to play basketball on a date. And I was like, okay, that's a good point. You probably never would have done that. Nowadays, that seems like a pretty wholesome date compared to what a lot of people are doing. But yeah, like, look how we've changed over time. There's a cycle that happens, and the standards get lower, lower, lower. And then occasionally we hit kind of a spiritual boom in our society, and our standards will go up. The last spiritual boom that we had in our society was the hippie movement. And that was a really kind of like not productive spiritual movement, because that lowered the standards even more. So we have not recovered from that, and we've not had a big spiritual boom since that time. So anyway, just to keep in mind there. So part of our tolerance is low means that we have to be really consistent in our teaching of cause and effect, and that's essential. Of course, for learning self-government. So we have the 5 styles of teaching. There's 5 ways that we teach our children to govern themselves. The first one is praise. And I've already given an example of what an effective praise looks like. It looks like a lot of describing. In fact, all of these 5 styles are heavy into describing. So if you can remember that, the more you describe, the less you will react. They are designed that way on purpose. The more you describe, the less you will react. You will go into a logical part of your brain if you start describing. When you're talking to them about a problem, if you start out describing, they will go into the logical part of their brain. They will be able to do more problem solving instead of more reacting and being emotional. So you praise using lots of description. And you know what? It's good to just surprise them sometimes with some praises when they're not even expecting it. Tell them when you will praise them so that they know those things will be coming, because those are positive consequences that teach cause and effect. But also sometimes surprise them, like, wow, everybody's been so great at following instructions today. I think we're all going to get ice cream or something like that. Do something that's fun in that way. Pre-teaching, I've already been showing you one way to do pre-teaching. There are 3 different ways that we do pre-teaching. I don't have time to go into all those ways here today, or we won't get to everything that I need to cover. But then there's also correcting. Now, when you correct a problem, in order to maintain calmness, again, you start with describing. The key term that I use is the word just, or the phrase just now. So that reminds me to describe what's happening. I'll say, just now I gave you an instruction and you didn't look at me. And you didn't keep a calm face, voice, and body. So I can see that you are choosing not to follow the instruction. So I start with that description. I tell them what I see and what it has taught me oftentimes. And then we give a rationale for that, a reason why they would care. This is a part where we're going to be speaking to their heart. So we might say something like, when you choose not to keep a calm face, voice, and body, then you actually make yourself unhappy. And it's harder for you to be understood because you get yourself in an emotional place. And then you go on to what they should have done. So then you describe what they should have done. What you should have done was you should have looked at the person, kept a calm face, voice, and body, said okay or asked to disagree appropriately, done the task immediately, and then check back. When you do that, especially if you were to disagree appropriately, then I would understand why maybe you didn't want to do this particular instruction. But since you chose not to do those things, so you see I gave another rationale. I've done description, rationale, description, rationale. Now I tell them what they've earned. I don't give consequences, they earn them. So then I would say, since you chose not to follow instructions, you have earned an extra chore. Now, I talk about family economy. This is our system of how we run our positive and negative consequences, that kind of thing. And that's just the term I use, is the family economy. I could go into great detail there, but I can't, just so that you know, we use extra chores as our primary negative consequence. There are a few others that we use here and there, and sometimes in family meetings we decide upon other negative consequences or positive consequences that we might use. So, but we keep it pretty simple, because if it's too complex, charts and tokens and buying things and whatever, it's hard to maintain. Usually you can't maintain that for longer than a couple of weeks. So we keep it simple, chores, plus when they get the opportunity to do a chore, that is good character development. Samuel Smiles, who wrote the book Character, said that work is the antidote for a sick character. So anyway, that's what we use, and then they get the opportunity to do their negative consequence, and then they get so part of their, remember, they do the accept a negative consequence, or accept a negative consequence, accept a consequence skill, which was the mix, remember, of following instructions and accepting no answers. They end up doing that consequence. I praise them for that. Then we practice doing things the right way. So we'll probably do some pre-teaching in there, give them extra practice on following instructions. So we'll do some little practice instructions for them so that they get the chance. So it's going to take a little bit of time to go through a full correction. I don't just say extra chore. That is an extra chore. You've earned an extra chore. I don't say that. We do teaching. Then they get the opportunity to keep a calm face, voice, and body, say okay, that they accept that teaching. And then they get the opportunity to do the consequence, check back, get praised, do the practices, get praised. They oftentimes get praised about 5 times during a correction interaction. So, and we should be praising our children 6 to 10 times for every one time that we correct them. So that's something that you need to know. Anyway, the other two type of teaching styles that we have for our children are intensive teaching and parent counseling. So intensive teaching is what we do for the child when they are completely out of instructional control, which means they will not follow an instruction. Now, this is the part where people have the biggest hang up on what about the different ages. Okay, so I see how the rule of 3, which is the thing that I usually talk about when I talk about intensive teaching, would work really well for a teenager. But what about my child who's younger, who has higher anxiety? Because little children all have higher anxiety. Everyone has an amount of anxiety, some people more than others, but little children always more than others. And that's because they're so small. And there's a lot of things in their lives that they are just at the whim of what happens to them. So when a parent knows their child has more anxiety, that parent knows the child's going to go out of control more often. When the parent sees the whining happening again and again and again, they're like, I can't, my little 3-year-old cannot lose their privileges for 24 hours, which is the third consequence in the rule of 3. So we do something different for the littles. Let me just quickly explain what we do for the olders and the youngers. But first, I just want to say for parent counseling session, this is a time where you have a one-on-one conversation with children. I don't have time here to go into the best ways to do a parent counseling session, but this is a heart-to-heart time where you're describing an upcoming situation or one troubling behavior that you've noticed maybe repeatedly, time and time again. Maybe it's some sort of like a craving, an addiction, you're going to be starting dating, something like that, and you're going to talk to them about this one-on-one and make a plan for their success. So that is what parent counseling is. You involve them in the decision-making and the planning for the future. We're just going to leave that there. Now let's go back to intensive teaching. So intensive teaching for older children looks like the rule of 3, which means you do 3 things 3 times. You give a pre-teach, and then you give an instruction, and then you do a correction. And you do that 3 different times. We actually have these cute little cards that help you work through the process so that you remember to do those 3 things and in what order they come and what they can earn. Now, in our family, they have 3 consequences that they can earn if they are in the rule of 3. And these 3 consequences start we start using the rule of 3 by the time they hit about age 6 or 7, but we modify the last consequence until they hit about probably age, like, say, 9. So the last consequence is a loss of privileges for 24 hours, which means they work, which means they sleep. They get their recommended hours of sleep. They get 3 meals a day. They might get to go to school if they're in control, and the rest of the time they are doing chores and problem solving exercises. So they are not just sitting around doing nothing. They actually are following instructions, which is what they weren't doing, which is what led to them losing all of those privileges for 24 hours. Now, for a 5-year-old, you're not going to say that they've lost their privileges for 24 hours. 9 years old, yes, but when they're younger, you might modify that as a different time. Unless you're already using it and it works fine, then don't modify it, don't change it. Some people don't know that. They just start using the 24 hours. And if it's working, then that's great. But you don't want to increase anxiety. The point is for them to be able to accomplish that big negative consequence, but for them to not want to do it. So anyone can accomplish a loss of privileges for 24 hours if they are developmentally age 9 and up. Okay, and if they are younger, you might want to say, well, you've lost your privileges for 6 hours, or you've lost your privileges for 12 hours, or something like that. But then you can't include their sleep time in it if it's a 6-hour loss of privileges. So keep that in mind. Sometimes just a number makes a difference. When a child loses their privileges for 24 hours, technically, it's not 24 hours that they're doing work. They sleep for how many hours? They have how many meals a day? They have to shower. They do their schoolwork. How many hours are left? Probably about 6, if that. So it's really not as bad as it sounds. But they need to know it is a full day of loss of privileges, and they have to come to you and say, I don't have my privileges. What else would you like me to do? Because that is them accepting a consequence, and it is up to them, not up to you. It should not punish you. It should be something that is for them to learn cause and effect and to learn to follow instructions. Now, if they are younger, we do a calm down place. So if they are under like age 6. Now this is give or take, because you actually can start using a modified rule of 3 at age 4, and they could earn like a 1 hour loss of privileges or a 2 hour loss of privileges. Oh, I didn't tell the other negative consequences. The 3 negative consequences in the rule of 3 are loss of privileges for 24 hours. That's the final one. But the first one is major maintenance. That's a large chore. You would cater this to whatever is age appropriate for them. And then the second one is sodas, or problem solving exercises. So we have these, this is a journal, a SOTAS journal. We have these problem-solving exercises that we do for the family, and this is an acronym that stands for situation, options, disadvantages, advantages, solution. That's what it means, and we talk through situations with them so that they get better at solving their problems. Anyway, those are the 3 things a person can earn if they go through the rule of 3 and they don't follow all 3 of those instructions. And there's more details about how to do that. I wish I could get into more of that training. Maybe we can as we get going into the question and answer section. Anyway, and then for young children, what we use is a calm down place. So you'll see on the little chart here, if some of you have the chart, these 2 boxes. Okay, so here's the rule of 3 box. Well, this box is the box about the calm down place, usually for children like ages 2 to 7. And they stop there. So if they're out of control, then we have pre-taught them and practiced, role played it ahead of time, that if they are out of control and not following instructions, then they go to the calm down place. They only stay there until they are calm. That is it. Calm means they can do all 5 steps of following an instruction. That's it. So, anyway, that's what they would do. We'd take them there, they get calm, and they could get calm instantly. They could sit down and go, okay, I'm calm. Then you go, great, you're being calm. Okay, so now let's talk about the correction, what should have happened. Let's get understanding happening here, because they can turn it on and off that fast. Have you ever had like a crying child and said, do you want a cookie? And all of a sudden they're like, oh yeah. And they just change just like that. They can change that fast. They don't know they can until you point it out to them and you help them see. And the calm down place helps them see they can make those decisions that quickly. They may have to stay there for a little bit until they're calm, and you're going to want to come and pre-teach them again and again. But don't leave them sitting there just for no good reason. It is not a negative consequence. It is only a trigger spot. After they get calm, then you do a corrective teaching, and they get the opportunity to do an age-appropriate extra chore. So that's what they earn at that age. That's best for their anxiety level, usually. Okay, that's the quick rundown on tolerances. So the third T is touching. Touching has a lot to do with the tone. So when a person is learning self-government, we need to give them the training, the skills they need. Then we need to tell them this is how we're going to correct it, and we need to consistently correct it. And then we need to make sure we're touching their hearts and that their heart is feeling touched. So touching, this is a tone which facilitates that heart-to-heart connection, okay? In your tone, there's so many different things that apply to tone. There's acceptance and trust in the person that they want to do good, and love and mercy and safety, comfort, understanding, all of these things, calmness, that's huge, huge part of tone. This is the feeling that exists within the teaching interactions and in your home just generally. Connecting is vital to any of the teaching, and this tone is what provides the connection for you. Okay, without the relationships being in the right place, you will not have a secure enough connection for a heart to change. It is the relationship and the feeling that you carry with you that facilitates the change of heart. So remember that. And so when I say to people, okay, well, we need to not indulge every single feeling that somebody has and make excuses for them and all this kind of stuff. That's true. And we need to help a person not feel like they have to have their feelings throwing up on everybody all the time, because that's a really a position of bondage to be in all the time. But are our feelings valuable? Yeah, because we can feel calm and we can feel connected and we can feel okay and safe. Those feelings are super beneficial. When we connect to a person, the first thing we do is we value the person. That leads to deeper connection. So we value them, we care about them as we are seeing them. And once we can touch their heart, then we can touch their mind, then we can achieve understanding. That's how it goes. Touch the heart, touch the mind, achieve understanding. So whenever I meet with a young person, I don't prejudge anything. I just look at them as a young person who needs to achieve understanding, because that's the tone that's what they want. They want to be understood. They want somebody to get it, you know? How many times have you heard a young person say about their parents, they don't get it? It's a real thing. Maybe you even thought it when you were a young person. They don't get it. That's what they want, is them to get it. Well, one time I was visiting a home. So occasionally I'll do these in-home trainings. One time I was asked to come to a home. This family had a daughter. She was in her teens. I don't know, maybe 16 or 17. I can't remember her exact age. And I always have personal conversations with each member of the family when I come to a home. Well, so I was having her initial personal conversation, and I was just asking her about things in her life, and she at first didn't really want to talk that much, but she could see I wasn't judging her, because I don't prejudge her. They can feel it. If we all of a sudden are like, whoa, and we start judging them, they can feel it, and then it's not safe. It's not safe. One way that they know we're judging them is by us telling everything to other people all the time. Okay? That's one way that they know we're judging them. So keep that in mind. Anyway, so I'm talking to her, and all of a sudden I get inspired to ask her about her boyfriend. So I start saying, oh, okay, so you got this boyfriend. Well, how long have you been, an item with him? Tell me a little bit about him. What do you like about him? Oh, yeah, my husband does that. I like that. Oh, really? Okay, he's interested in that. That's interesting. Okay. And then I got this feeling like there's more to this boyfriend, and it's affecting her connection to her parents, I can tell. So I just said to her, I said, so are you sleeping with your boyfriend? Just like really like, hey, have you had sex with him yet? Just totally. And she's like, yeah, I have. And she realized she'd answered a question she'd been hiding. And so then I talked to her, I said, your parents would understand. You really need to talk to them about this. Because if you're hiding stuff from them, think what that's going to do to your relationship. And so I helped her prepare to talk to her parents about it. And she was nervous because she thought they would judge. But in the end, they were able to figure out where she was really at. That's what it means to connect. You have to be that safe place. No matter what they say to you, they could say, I'm addicted to porn, I'm sleeping around, I'm doing drugs, I'm whatever it is. It has to be okay. Not that you're going to just keep it there, but it has to be okay. So anyway, good parents offer consolation. Okay, they offer comfort and hope by having that appropriate tone of calmness with them. And if you struggle with calmness, I've got something somewhere. I have a whole class on it, actually, called The Power of Calm. It's in the implementation course. Calmness is a big topic of conversation when we have our parenting mastery trainings. That's something we work a lot on, is how to achieve a place of calmness. So anyway, our example of overcoming ourselves, just so you know, gives comfort and hope. And letting them know, hey, we're working on stuff with ourselves too. That's important. Be a real person. Don't tell them all your vices you've ever done. If you've conquered them, you've conquered them. You'll know the time when you need to tell a vice that you've conquered. But you need for them to know that you're not necessarily perfect. You're just living your role the best that you can. Okay, the fourth T is transforming. So transforming is to change from one state to another. Whenever I think of transforming, I think of a butterfly. So butterflies transform in amazing ways, as far as it seems to me. I love the monarch butterfly. The monarch butterfly has a lifespan of like 30 days. Okay, that's about it. So they have 3 to 4 days that they're in like baby time. They're like an egg. Okay. And then after that, they are the larva stage, which is the caterpillar stage. That's for like 10 to 14 days. And so if you think of that as, so the baby stage, when they're an egg, they just grow. That's like our babies. When they're baby stage, they just grow. That's all they do. Okay. Then when they hit larva stage, which is when they hit about 18 months, okay, soon as they are verbal, all of a sudden they hit the caterpillar stage. Now it's like gather, 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 grow, grow, grow. And they're just gathering up as much as they can, as fast as they can, and they're storing that information. Then comes the pupa stage, or the chrysalis stage, when they're in a cocoon. This is 10 to 14 days of their life. And this is the time of transformation. So this is the time when they are having more understanding, more depth, more planning for their lives. Okay. Even for many parents, child raising is this time of chrysalis where they are really transforming themselves into who it is that they're supposed to become. And then finally, they're an adult butterfly, sometimes for only a couple of days. It's like a max of 7 days, but it's usually like 2 to 3, maybe 5 days that they are a butterfly and they are at full maturity. And so this is when you're like later on in years. Now, can you adjust to these stages? Yes, I feel like that I have adjusted my stages as a butterfly. I picked up my learning rate. I decided, okay, I'm going to really get into this deep chrysalis phase, and I am going to study, learn. I'm going to examine and make systems and do so. I am going to speed this up for myself so that I don't have to just look back and go, oh, look what I learned, but I can know what I'm learning along the way. Anyway, so you can do that for yourself. But generally speaking, when your children leave your home, they are still in pupa stage or the chrysalis stage. They're not in adult butterfly stage yet. They are still transforming, which is why college life is such a vulnerable time, which is why they need good roommates. They need a good school that has moral people, that has, because otherwise they can be transformed like that. And sometimes you even pick it, super careful for them, and they still end up, getting corrupted in certain ways. Like that can happen. We really have a rape of conscience that's happening in our society due to a movement, and it is a very deliberate movement that has happened in higher education, which is sad because there's never been such a push for higher education as there is now in this phase of life. So anyway, we all learn bit by bit, but it's good to know where our children actually are at so that we can help them go through a proper transformation. So to transform an individual, whether it's yourself or somebody else, it requires an investment. You have to invest in them, or they have to invest in them. You have to invest in you. There is this moment of saying, this is important. Who I am, who I'm becoming, what I need is important. This investment is also coupled with honesty and evaluation, okay? In order to have a good investment, it has to be honesty plus evaluation. You have to take an honest look at who you really are, where you're going, and track yourself. So that is the self-government process. So part of this investment process is to have meetings together to discuss. So in our family, we have 3 different meetings. About these journals here, we have the couples meeting. So that's the husband and wife meeting that we have with each other once a week. Then we have the family meeting. This is a full family meeting where we talk about how we're doing at becoming that type of family that we set that vision to become. And then the mentoring meeting. So the mentoring meeting is where we discuss individually, one-on-one with that child, their goals, their plans, how we can support them, all that kind of thing. We have to improve and increase our patience as we work through this transformation process. To get them to adulthood is absolutely a process where they have to have more understanding, more honesty, and more goals. And it requires patience for us. We want it to happen instantly, and for them to be perfect instantly, they have to work through it. Their brains are not functioning properly in their teen years. So we are going to be talking about the teen brain here in just a second. And I think you'll see that that hormonally it throws off their ability to even think clearly in their brain. So it requires more support and more patience on our part. There was a gal that came to our home. Her name was Martha, we'll say, and I'm naming her that. That wasn't really her name, but Martha came to our home to visit for a political conference that was going to be in the area. She was 18 years old, very mature academically, but had a lot of fears, and socially she was very quiet and not super great at problem solving, that kind of thing. And I kind of took her on as my little friend through this conference that we had that was for 3 days. She stayed at our home and she came with me, and I just made an investment in her. I started talking to her about where she was going in life, what she was doing, what was important to her. And you need to know that there were key political views that I did not agree with her about. I had definitely a different understanding. So I asked her questions about what she thought instead of just explaining my side all the time. She knew that I really cared, and all of a sudden she opened up. She just started telling me everything and asking my opinion on things, and then started actually wanting my opinion on some of these political matters and other things. And I think some of her ideas fundamentally changed just because I made an investment in her, to know her, to understand her, to ask her questions, and then to help her make plans with her best interest in mind. When her family found out that she had opened up to me and had so much talking to me, they were like, "How did you do that? She is so shy. She will not talk to anybody." I was like, "Well, I just made an investment in her. I just decided I cared about her. I just decided it mattered. I decided I wanted to help her, and to help her, feel loved and understood." And then, boom, all of a sudden, things changed for her. So anyway, all right. This next section is all about all of the lessons that are learned in this family garden, I guess, that we are growing here with all of us, all of our individual little plants and people. So I don't know if any of you garden, but I do, and I've noticed that the garden is ever changing. Gardens totally interest me. It seems that since the beginning of time, people have been tending gardens, and it seems some of the greatest lessons in life can actually be learned from the garden. The garden teaches about relationships, about leadership, about stewardship. The garden teaches about study and about history. It teaches about math. The garden teaches about law. It teaches about life. The garden provides moral, physical, and social grounding for the human race. I mean, the garden is amazing. I really feel like that was one of the greatest gifts to us, to be able to till the ground. Some people may think of gardening as some sort of a punishment, perhaps, because they'd rather just sit around and have everybody give them everything that they need all day. But in the end, what a blessing it is for us to be able to work hard and work the ground. I don't think that it is an accident at all that the greatest minds and leaders in history were often farmers, men and women who learned the law of the land, and then they applied those truths to every other aspect of their lives and of ours, because they were leading us. So let's talk a little bit about wise gardeners, since we are the gardeners in our gardens. Wise gardeners plan ahead. They study out the best way to do things, and that's what you're doing right now, which is really great. And hopefully you continue to study, because that's going to be important. Wise gardeners look ahead and say, what are the possible pests that could get in the way of my garden? What could afflict my trees? They do all of these things as they're starting their gardens, if they're wise. Now, sometimes they don't know to do that, and so then they have to do it later. Some people try gardening, they declare themselves a failure, and then they try it again years later, and they know more now, so they're better at it, which is nice. Wise gardeners know that conditions don't always stay the same, and I think that's a really important thing. Sometimes we think really linearly, well, if I teach them this self-government principle and this self-government principle, then things are always going to stay the same way. Well, no, they don't. So one big key part of this whole last part of the training this morning is it's not always the same because they are different in their different ages. Now, do all of the skills apply to everyone? Yes, but they have different needs at different times. And so conditions in the garden don't always stay the same. The garden is always changing. So the gardener must know how to read the signs in the garden and adjust their gardening skills to match each trial that comes their way. So any of my vines, my grapevines or my trees pruned. And so I didn't get nearly as much fruit. Everything was less. Although in a way it was good for me this year because I still had a lot canned from last year, but I didn't need as much. But still, it was kind of sad to see everything grow less. Now, some of them did grow a little bigger, which was nice. And so we learn, okay, well, if we don't do our job, then we get less yield, right? We get less food. Now, there's an interesting thing about trees. Trees are often part of a garden. You do have to cut trees for them to maintain their beauty, their looks, as well as to be as productive as possible. So it's much easier to trim and prune a tree when it's little, to shape it, okay? So if you want to have a tree that gives you good peaches, you've got to have kind of like a little opening in the middle where the sun can get in and it's not too shady, which means when it's little, you have to find the main stalk, you keep only the main stalk, and then the two separate stalks that make that V in the middle. And then after that, you can take additional branches, but none in getting in a certain area of the tree. So things that point toward the center, you're very picky about whether you'll keep them or not. And you just lop those things off. You just take them off bit by bit. And so basically, you don't allow the little young trees to go wild. When the tree gets older and it's time to remove something, it's much harder on the tree and on you as the gardener. You have to saw that thing. If you want to make an ugly tree that's never been groomed look pretty, it is really a bad experience for the tree. Like, I mean, you have to take away so much of that wood that it has produced, and the tree experiences quite a bit of shock. And the same thing happens if you're coming into teaching self-government and you've got, say, a teenager or maybe even a child who's almost reached adulthood or who's even there, and they've not been pruned very much. And now you're going, I should have pruned a lot more. I should have corrected a lot more. I should have taught them some of these skills, and I didn't. It's not too late, but it is a little harder for them to overcome those habits. That's just how it goes. So the younger they are, the better it is to do the teaching, but it's never too late. I've seen some people take some pretty wild trees and chop them way back and be able to grow a nice, beautiful shaped tree before. So it can happen, but there can be a little bit of scarring from the old days that occurs. And that's just the way it goes when you're a gardener. Sometimes those things occur. So we are going to talk about gardening our children, gardening our families through all of the different phases. Now, I have a chart. I'm trying to decide if there's going to be a ton of effort or a ton of worth in showing the chart here. Let me share, I think. You can see all my millions of tabs open. Okay, so here's a chart that I have, and we'll just kind of go through this chart bit by bit really quickly. So we're going to do, if you want to make the chart for yourself, then it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If you include the top bar, 7. Okay, 7 rows going across, and our columns are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 columns going down, okay? If you want to make a chart for yourself, maybe landscape on a piece of paper. It might even take a couple of pieces of paper. Leave some big boxes for taking some notes here. So let's look at babies. I'm saying babies are ages 0 to 18 months, okay? So we're gonna quickly just run through each of these individual age groups. So when they are babies, they don't understand very much about the world. Okay, they're learning about their own emotional security, and they study faces a lot, so that's a big thing. And they are learning how to read those facial expressions. So when mom and dad are looking at the baby is learning a lot. They're saying, oh, okay, well, that means that feels good. That must be a happy thing, right? And they don't know the word happy yet, but they know they like it. They know it feels comfortable. They're learning how to interact. They mimic a lot of the expressions that they see, even when they don't know exactly what they mean yet. This is a super cute phase, right? By 9 months, oftentimes they have a lot more word recognition. They know their own names. They know what some of the words mean of things around them. They actually know, doctors say, what the word no means by age 9 months. So if your 9-month-old is kind of verbal, could they actually accept a no answer? Yes, theoretically, they understand what no means. That doesn't mean they're always going to, follow you on when you tell them no, because that's a whole different thing. They're testing the limits, and stuff like that, and how far they can go. But technically they could. Now their prefrontal cortexes in the brain are very, very small. So they're not doing a ton of intellectual processing, not a ton of problem solving. It's a lot of mimicking and feeling. They're in an emotional part of their brain during this time of development. So by 12 months old, they know a lot of what is being said around them, really the majority of it. They know what's being said. By 15 months old, they are able to follow simple commands. So can your 15-month-old follow instructions? Yes. Now, are you going to be able to sit down and say, these are the 5 steps for following an instruction? Not likely, okay? So when they're 15 months old, you're going to probably just prompt them, say, okay, look at mommy. See the calm face, happy face? Let's have a happy face. Okay. Now mommy is going to tell you to do something and you say, okay, and then you do it. So you're just going to take them through it bit by bit, peel away the layers and make it simple for them. When they're teeny, that's what you do. Because you can't appeal too much to this front part. There's not that much there, okay? And so lots of times we create a lot of frustration for our littles because we try to appeal so much to right here that then they just get confused and frustrated, and they have a melt to our children. Let me rephrase. They need a lot of talking. They need a lot of talking from the parents, but they don't need it to be complex talking. They need to be able to pull out pieces and use the pieces. So lectures aren't going to be very effective, okay, is what I'm saying. Actually, lectures are never effective, so just write that in the notes, okay? They're never effective. So anyway, by 15 months, they can actually follow instructions, but you're going to have to help them through it a little bit more. By the time they hit 18 months old, that is a time when you can start doing following instructions, accepting no answers, accepting consequences, okay? Disagreeing appropriately, you can coach them through depending on where they're at verbally, but usually by 18 months, they're pretty good verbally, or, they can do sentences and stuff like that a lot of the times. Okay, so let's talk about what your 0 to 18-month-old child needs. They need a lot of touch from their parents. That's big. This gives them the security that they need. They need quiet, soothing sounds, okay? So it's kind of weird that we give them these toys that are like, ah! And they're like all these like loud noises all of the time, when really they need life to feel calm and comfortable. And if their life is more soothing, they will behave in a more calm way. So that's something that I think a lot of parents don't know. They rile up the child, they get them all worked up, and then they're like, how come my child is just so hyper? Well, because some children are wired a little bit more energetically. We know that, but we shouldn't be getting them so worked up, right? Okay, they can play and stuff like that and have fun and wrestle around with dad a little bit, but it shouldn't be that we're constantly stimulating them. Okay, so they heard sounds in utero that were more low tones. They respond well to low tones. Lots of times they respond better to dad when it comes to calming when they're babies. So, and I know that mothers just sometimes, without even thinking of it, will talk in lower tones to their children when they're trying to calm them down. They need routine. That's a big thing that they need. They need bonding. That's huge. The voice and the face of the parent is the thing that teaches the child more than anything else. If you can just remember that with your babies ages 0 to 18 months, they need to be looking at you, talking to you, being with you, touching you. That's huge. Touch is big time. Okay, so what do parents oftentimes think that their children need? They think their children need security. They think their children need food, sleep, and comfort. And actually, their children do need all of those things. Sometimes what the parents think and what the children need actually match. Sometimes it does not match. So the child doesn't actually need a lot to do during that time. We probably could add that in there. But a lot of times parents think that children need a lot to do during that time. They don't. Life can be slow, and that's okay for children that age. So keep that in mind. Sometimes we're worried about like, oh, well, we're doing like these other things with the olders and we're not doing as much here. We need to make sure that the youngers get the majority of our attention. They should always have more attention than the olders get, but they should not be overscheduled or something like that. So what do they want? They want to be with mom and dad. So that's the next column going over. They want to be with mom and dad. They want to smell them, hear them, be talked to by them, practice their words, mimic them. They want to be touched. They want to bond. Whoever they are with during the day is who they are going to do that with. So if mom and dad are not with them very much, then they will just get that from somebody else. So parents have to decide, well, is that important or not? Anyway, that they really want deliberate, non-emotional communication so that they get that feeling of comfort and bonding with parents. Now let's look at the traps. So one of the traps for children ages 0 to 18, many parents think that this time of life is very easy to replace by anyone or anything. And so they're like, oh, that's okay. Well, if I'm not around my children that much now, so long as I am when they're older, then that's okay. And actually, so like lots of times, say fathers, maybe they're working away a lot of times and they don't see their children as much, and years later they come back. The children don't usually have as tight of a bond with dad, and that's because they didn't see dad as much during those formative years. So even though people think that that's a thing because the child can tell them more when they're older, so the child can say, I miss you, I want to be with you, and they can't say that when they're younger, the parents think that they actually won't be missed. We need to be really careful about that. Our children are more intuitive when they're younger even than when they're older. So we need to be with them. That's huge. Anyway, basic thing they need is to be with their parents. That's the most important. Okay, so how to communicate with them during this time as far as TSG, and when we're focusing on these 4 T's of training and tolerances, what do we correct, what do we not correct, and touching their hearts, as well as, helping them transform and go to the next level of learning. Okay, so we have to talk to them all the time. And we need to teach them about calmness by being calm, because they are in a mimicking stage. What we are doing for ourselves is the most important lesson. If we are scheduled, if we are calm, if we are happy, if we are slower to react to things, then they will be too. If we are careful, some people, their children just destroy everything. None of my children destroyed. They were all very active, but I did not allow destroying to occur. I was not a destroyer. I was a careful person. In everything I taught them how to be careful and how to take care of different things through all their stages of development. Well, they start watching us when they're really teeny tiny. And so we need to do that. The parents should be practicing the 4 basic skills for themselves, giving themselves instructions, no answers. They should start to point out cause and effect to the child, okay? And as the verbal skills increase, because of this additional talking, which is one of the important things that happens during this stage, then they can start talking, like I said, very simply about, say, okay, keep a calm face, calm voice. This is not a calm voice. This is a calm voice, and explaining those things so they can start learning the basics. This really is a time for just doing a lot of pre-teaching. Don't expect immediate results. They have a long way to go when they're still babies. I think a lot of people expect that when they teach their children these 4 basic skills at 12 months or 18 months, that somehow their child's just going to pick them up and just run with them. And I know we have smart children, but that's maybe a bit much. Okay, so moving to toddlers, 18 months to 4 years old. So toddlers can speak in short sentences. They understand a lot of what's happening around them and what's said to them, even if they can't necessarily communicate on the same level. By the time they are 24 months old, the child is having conversations with you, if they are developmentally at level. Okay, some, are a little behind because of, preemie birth or whatever, things like that. But they start expressing their inner life to you. They start sharing their thoughts and their ideas and to other people. And sometimes their thoughts and ideas are embarrassing, okay? So that's when we kind of laugh a little bit because they say just the funniest things, right? When they're at this age. At age about 4 or 5, the child has the ability to make more brain connections than at any other time in their life. So they have these little synapses that are making connections to all these different parts of the brain. Parents should absolutely focus on making the correct brain pathways for the child. Since they know the child is connecting all this information up, they should keep things very clear. Good is good, bad is bad. No bent stuff. The hero always wins, the bad guy always gets punished. That's how it has to be for children who are ages 18 months to 4 years old, because you don't want them to hook that a bad guy is actually a good guy. That information does not come until later. That is mature information. If you give that information too soon, then they start pretending they're the bad guy all the time because, well, they could just be a little oppositional, which can happen too. They're developing their basic emotional and social skills also during this time. So that's a big time to be working on how to be social as a family, because the first social unit of society that a person ever has is their family. So what do they need during this time? They naturally start to look out of themselves all of a sudden, and they start putting the pieces of the world together with what's going on around them. So parents need to be there to provide information for that child. It's going to be the family environment or whatever environment that child is with. If it's with the TV, then that's going to be what helps them put their world together. I know people who give their children, their toddlers, cell phones to play with. I have seen people put their toddlers in front of televisions. I went to a house one time, and the lady's like, she's running this business out of her house, and she's like, oh yeah, it's super easy. I just give my son a bottle in his bouncy chair. I mean, he was literally like 6 months old. Maybe he was like 9 months old. He sat in a little bouncy chair, one of those layback bouncy chairs with his bottle, and watched TV the whole day. She'd groomed him to do that, and she thought it was so great. She didn't have to deal with anything. She could run her business. My heart was broken. I thought that child is not getting anything he needs. And if he is getting what he needs because he's going to go looking for it anyway and putting his world together, he's going to start getting it from the TV, and that is so bad. Anyway, it was really sad. She didn't realize what she was doing. The parent is the guide to the world around the child. Okay, so when they do the funny things and the little annoying games, the parents just think of themselves as the guide. They play along, and that doesn't mean that they pick up the sippy cup 400 times. Sometimes they just say, we're done, and that's okay. But they are the guide to what comes next and what's most appropriate for the child. So anything that we show them will help their brain grow. So we've got to remember that. Whatever we tell them, whatever they show them, that builds a connection in their brain. Since brains are not just born, but they're built over time through experiences, a toddler needs the parent to choose the experiences carefully. Don't just give them willy-nilly to the neighbor's house and think, well, they're young, maybe they won't understand what's going on. They might not understand completely what's going on, but it will form them and create different pathways in their brain. So keep that in mind. Be picky. I think that's the one thing that they need is their parents to be picky and be there. Don't just expose them to anything around them. So what parents think they need, parents think that a child in their toddler years needs stimulation, needs friends, needs movies, needs loud toys, lots to see and do. Because they see that this child is gathering up all this information, they sometimes overload the information. So they don't give them what they really need. They need a bonding and connection. They need that type of information for the synapses in the brain. So when I was at Disneyland this last Monday, I saw all of these people with their little toddlers there, and how cute. Who just want to take their little ones to Disneyland, right? So they have all their little children there, and I see these children just like they're hating it, they're whining, they're whatever, and the parents are trying to get them to have a good time, and I'm like, they're done. They are overstimulated. The parents need to just like sit down and read the child a story about, Aladdin or whatever, and it would be better than all of this. That doesn't mean there's not a point and you can't do it. It's just that that's not their main need. And so sometimes we spend so much time and money and effort, and when in reality what they need is they need to be calmly talked to, instructed, played with, that kind of a thing. Okay, so what they want, toddlers want boundaries. They may not act like they want them, but they do. They are at a testing time. So they want to know what they can do, what they can't do. They are literally looking for the no answer. So toddlers have to be observed all the time. Observed and taught consistently, all the time. And that's the part that wears us out, right? But they need this. It's so important. They also want to learn new things, right? So the parent is the best teacher for those new things as well. So what are the traps? Many parents think that because a toddler is so curious that they need to be scheduled with, curiosity type experiences around them all the time. Nothing ruins a toddler's love of learning more than stress and a busy schedule. Do not stress your toddlers out. That's the worst thing you can do. They can't handle it. They're dealing in an emotional place all the time. Their front part can't problem solve this stuff very well. So you can't be stressed, and you can't be carting them off here and there and everything all the time. Otherwise, they get stressed. So I know that's hard to say in our fast-paced life. And, some children are more resilient than others with that kind of thing. But just keep it in mind, because you're going to make your life better if you don't do that. So the second trap is that parents think, let's see, at this age that parents introduce too much social. Okay, so the best social for toddlers is their parents, not other friends. So keep that in mind. Some parents are like, they gotta go to preschool, they gotta go to whatever. They need social, they need friends, they need playgroups, they need all this kind of stuff. They don't actually need that. They need the connection that comes with parents. That's going to lay a better foundation for them than those social things. The social can come later, so don't stress over that. That is one of the traps that parents get into, and then they create a child that is more socially minded than familial minded, and then you end up having more of an issue on your hands. So it's definitely more troubling. The third most common trap for parents during the toddler years is to think that their child's misbehaviors are cute or age appropriate. Instead of guiding the child down the right path, they just videotape it or laugh about it or ignore it or whatever it happens to be. They put up with it. You cannot have high tolerances. If you do not correct the stuff in the toddler years, you're compounding your problem for later. The child will be happier later if they know their boundaries in the toddler years. That is probably the most important time to correct things consistently, actually. Most important, lay the foundation. Okay, so how do we communicate with them with the teaching self-government focuses? So pre-teaching, we've got to teach them ahead of time what is required. Lots of little practice, discussing again, this is when we should use this skill. Do you see how this person in the story needs this skill? Let's practice how the person in the story should use this skill. The brain of the toddler has a long way to go, so they just need a lot of patience and a lot of practice and instruction again and again and again. So don't expect them to spout off these huge disagree appropriatelys to you. It's not going to happen very much during that time. They can. There are 2-year-olds, my 2-year-olds could disagree appropriately. I taught them how to do it. They are able to do it, especially in simple ways. But mostly what they need is practice doing things the right way. So whenever you have to correct something, don't forget to practice it the right way. That is the most important thing for your youngers. I mean, everyone should be practicing things the right way, but the youngers need it more than anybody else because their prefrontal cortexes are trained differently because they are so small. So they need to learn cause and effect. It's very important for them. The parents need to consistently correct and consistently praise. Make the praising really animated and fun because remember, they are still in a very emotional place, and that high emotion of the good and the fun will help them know absolutely that was the right thing. As your children are teenagers, when you do super high emotion with the praising, they think you're just weird, so you might not want to do it then, okay? But when they are toddlers, that is the time where they're like, yay, you went potty on the potty, and it's like just so exciting during that time. Okay, some anxiety is normal during the toddler years, so remember that. And just really work gently with it, okay? Instead of trying to just conquer all of their anxiety, they can't conquer it just yet, okay? And so really helping us, having us be calm is important, and understanding where they're at. Use a calm down spot when they go completely out of control instead of necessarily using the rule of 3. Although some people do a modified rule of 3 with a really smart toddler who can problem solve pretty well, it is a possibility. Okay, moving on to children ages 4 to 12. Where are they at? They are looking for stability so that they can conquer new problems. Their brains are super active and forming more and more of those pathways really early on. Over time, the brain weeds out all those unused pathways and synapses in an effort to be more efficient. So it really is great that they are trained closely by the parent, because the parent's going to help them find the most effective pathways to hook into and get rid of the ones like maybe the oppositional ones, the rude ones, the whatever, the things they experiment with. Those are the ones they need to get rid of. Anyway, luckily new synapses can be built. So if for some reason you miss a pathway that you should have gone down, you can go back and you can always build new synapses. It just takes more effort. So when the child is aged like 5 and 6 years old, it doesn't take much effort. The synapses are already there. You can just decide to use them, which is really nice. They need lots of skill development, okay, during this time. And they have anxiety and perfectionism sometimes. This is a thing that can surface for them. They see the world around them as big and overwhelming and scary, and growing up is kind of scary. And so skill development is going to help with that. So learning those 4 basic skills, I mean, this is the time. You can learn them at any time, okay? As we've already learned, you guys are the gardeners and you've got to learn them too, right? But this is like probably the best time to learn the skills. If you have a child that is between the ages of 4 and 12, especially between the ages of 4 and 8 or 9, that is the best time to learn how to communicate with each other and to learn those 4 basic skills. Absolutely. They are learning to pay attention during this time. They're learning how to follow rules and instructions. They start wanting to plan ahead. They learn to problem solve because they have a better grasp on cause and effect all of a sudden, because their prefrontal cortex has expanded significantly during all of this brain development that's been occurring. So they have increased executive functioning and abilities and self-awareness and stuff like that. It's really a great time for their little minds to just grasp and learn as much as they can. This is why at this time we teach them all to read usually and stuff like that. Okay, so what do they need? They need a sturdy family life to offer support for a healthy brain development. If their family life is stressful and not sturdy, if like divorce occurs and stuff like that during this time, it can really shake their world. That's when we see little children going into depression, when little children don't usually go into depression and stuff like that. So they need stability, lots and lots of stability. They need someone to nurture their communication abilities. These communication abilities will pave the way for good relationships during their adolescence. They need low stress. They need to fail a lot. So they need to make mistakes, be corrected, get instructed, make mistakes, be corrected. They need that a lot. That's how they learn. So if they are getting corrected all the time, that doesn't mean they're doing anything wrong. That means they're doing things right. They're learning what they need to be doing. So it's okay if they fail a lot. They need to succeed a lot. They need to work a lot. They need to bond through touch and talk, just like the other children did. That's always important, especially up. We all need touch. We absolutely all do. It's actually good for our brains. It increases oxytocin, which helps with leveling out the calmness and stuff in the brain. So touching our children is vital. If you're not a toucher, just be one, whether you like it or not. That's just how it is. Anyway, and teach them how to touch, because if they don't touch later, they could end up bottoming out at certain stages of their life because they're not getting the chemicals that they need in their brain. They need parents to set good examples. They need to plan for good relationships, good behaviors, and they need to know how to manage stress and prioritize their tasks. These are the things that they are wanting to learn during that time. What do parents oftentimes think children need when they're ages 4 to 12? Parents, again, oftentimes think they need stimulation. They misread the child's desire for friends and stuff, and they give more and more and more friends. So a child really does need interaction when they're with their parents and their family members more. This is the time with my children that I do allow more like friend time during the day than at any other time. So when my children hit the ages of 12 to 18, they study more, they go more academic. So once they hit about age, like say 8 to 12, that's probably the time where I allow the most social time for my children. A lot of times, parents give that social time too early and they give it too much. So definitely factor in, well, how much do they need? So I decided, okay, well, my children need maybe like 1 to 2 social interactions a week with people outside of the family. So we're going to arrange play dates or whatever. If they're with children the whole day at school, that's actually plenty. And you need to focus probably the rest of the time, mostly just on family time. Even though probably school isn't the ideal social because they don't always get to do what they want to do, still they are with people the whole day. They need that bonding with family. Okay, so they need standards for their life. That's huge. They are looking for their life standards. This is the time when you prepare them for adulthood with those standards. Lay it on before they hit adolescence. They need to know the standards. They need to buy into them. They need to see the examples of them in life around. You need to discuss deeply about things. They will be used forever afterwards. So what do they want? They want someone to help them with their problems. They know they're struggling with things, like lying and stuff, which often happens around age 7 or 8 years old. They want someone to catch them and to help them not do it, and to they don't want somebody to pass those things off as normal. They want someone to say, oh, you know what, that's something we need to work on. So, and not take it personally, but to actually conquer it. They want answers to their questions. They want to do grown-up things, and they want responsibility. That's where they're at. So let's look at the traps. So many parents do too much for their children. So you can see what they want is they want to do grown-up things, and they want responsibilities. Well, if parents are doing too much for their children, they're taking that away from the children. And lots of parents do it because they're like, well, it won't be clean enough. It won't be perfect enough. As we've been talking, Porter has been making all of the little mini bundt cake birthday cakes for my mother's 70th birthday, which is happening this afternoon. Are some of them a little bit burnt? Yes, I've noticed there are some that are a little bit burnt. Does that matter? No, I totally don't care with the facts a minute. Anyway, because he is learning to take care of things. He's doing adult things. He's doing exactly what I would do. Anyway, so we can't take away all of their responsibilities. We've got to give them more, not less. Many parents think that work is bad and play is good, and they present that to the children. Well, let's get all the work done, and then we can play, well, then you'd have to earn an extra chore. Work should be okay. Work should be fine. That attitude comes from us. This is the time when we give that attitude. Work is okay, and work is productive, enjoyable, always will. And if playtime is all fun, then that's a good thing too, right? So we should be giving, we should not be having stress. Another trap that parents do is they take on too many activities, and they end up increasing the child's stress load inspiration, and can like help them have a hard time figuring out their problems and accomplishing hard things, because stress disables your ability to problem solve and to think, and they end up in a place where they can't think very well. So how do we communicate with them with the 4 T's and the teaching self-government during this stage of development? We can keep using the calm down spot, maybe between the ages of 4 to 6, but then their prefrontal cortex has really boomed and developed after age 5. And so we know that at that point we could start using the rule of 3. So the rule of 3 is when we do those 3 things 3 times, and they are able to follow the line of logic in the rule of 3. So when you do the rule of 3, the hardest part of the rule of 3 is the pre-teach that occurs, because it changes each time that you do it, and you decrease the amount of instructions that you're out. So at the very beginning, you mention all 3 instructions, and then the second time you mention you'll give 2, and the third time that you'll give only 1 instruction. So it changes over time, but their brains can follow it. Their brains can follow it even better than your brain can follow it. And so they are ready for that to happen during that stage. Lots of pre-teaching, that's important. Hopefully, though, by the time they hit 4, they are able to do all 4 of those basic skills. So, and they can do them probably pretty well. So at about age 6, and what we want to start doing is have more parent counseling sessions about specific issues. So maybe about relationships with our brothers and sisters and what we want that to be like, or maybe a lying, or maybe, what could we do to, make a system for you to keep your room more clean or something, or what do you want to accomplish in your academics with this? And so we start to have more meetings. So that's where your mentor meetings are going to come in, and your parent counseling sessions are going to be coming in with them a lot during that time. So you'll pick an issue and pull them aside and discuss it. You're going to want to keep encouraging standards. In the book, we have the family standard. This is going to be in a time where the family standard is going to really matter between the ages of 4 and then until they leave the home. But you've got to instill those standards. This is like what your family will say, won't say, and will wear and won't wear, and will watch and won't watch, and all of those kinds of things. Those are all of those instructions and no answers. That's the best time to share them. You can share them when the children are old. It's a little bit more difficult for them to transition than it is during this stage of life. And really all the way up to age like 13, 14 sometimes, they are still very, very, once they hit about 14 to 18, they feel like they have determined who they are. So at that point, it is much harder for them to make an emotional investment to change. So anyway, they often have anxiety, and so because of that, they have to learn how to accept a no answer. They will become little perfectionists that make their life so hard for themselves if they can't learn how to accept a no answer. So this is vital, because during this time, they have this view of life that isn't necessarily realistic. And so they can become, it's very easy, and their stress load can increase. They need to bond closely through shared activities, conversations with their parents. Okay, let's move on to the olders. Now, I know already like 6 minutes over time. I wanted to be done with this by 6 minutes ago. Sorry, but I don't want to jip all the people with older children. So I'm going to go ahead and just go through this and talk a little bit about transitioning into adulthood, and then we'll go to the question section. So my apologies for running a little bit behind. I have a tendency to do that. And then I have to battle, what do I do? Do I share more or end on time? At this point, I think I have to give this, though, because it's vital. So the teenage brain, this is important, okay? Where are teens at? I like to call them youth, okay? They are emerging adults. Don't forget that. This is the time where they are becoming adults, and you've got to get them ready to do that. So don't baby them. Don't coddle them. They have got to step up and do all kinds of stuff that you would do. At this stage in life, they technically should be able to do just about anything that you can do. And so that's wanting to get them to, so that they will confidently be able to emerge to adulthood. One of the reasons that young people do not launch is because not enough. We have a situation of agility and the extension of parents being making them step up enough, probably because parenting is easier, that they just do everything themselves. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to have a fight. Their child's oppositional. They don't know how to handle it. So instead, the child gets babied, and then the child is just fragile forever. So we have to be careful about that. During this time, they have more stress, okay? They have to learn how to prioritize their tasks and manage their stress. They are more moody during this phase. Have you noticed? Some of you that have children that are that age, have you noticed? They're more moody. That's just how it goes, okay? And one of the reasons is because their hormones in their brain, okay? Yeah, they're growing in all these different places and getting ready, be able to make babies and all this kind of stuff. But the biggest thing is that their hormones in their brains are actually directing all kinds of activity, making them more confused socially, mentally, physically. They're struggling from confusion, and this gets them frustrated. Okay. They also have all of these voices, especially if you've got voices that are like the internet voices, okay, super confusing to add to real life voices. And many of them are getting into technology a lot. And because of that, they are actually experiencing even more moodiness because they are experiencing more confusion. Their hormones are processing things emotionally. That's what's happening. Hormones lead to increased emotion. They're dumping the emotion. We're talking a teenage boy, once he hits about 14 years old, 50 times, 50 times more hormone than he had before he hits puberty. 50 times. Are they going to be a little grumpy, a little pushback, a little talk back, a little sass? Yeah, they're going to. Does that mean it's okay and that we should just put up with it? No. They need to be taught through this, but we need to understand this is part of it. So if all of a sudden our child that was so sweet all of a sudden starts pushing back at us and having sass, that doesn't mean that something has necessarily gone wrong with the child, okay? What that means is they have a dump of hormone that's going on in their brain, and girls oftentimes experience this for a longer period of time than boys. And that's why then people are like, oh, it's puberty, you know? Okay. Puberty is more about what happens in the brain than even what happens in the body. And so if we can remember that, we're trying to help the brain along through this process. We need to know what's going on there. Okay, so the hormones are changing, they affect the brain, the body's changing, all the oil and muscle and BO and, body fats and muscles getting reorganized and stuff. They're often sleepy and drained of energy. And actually, one of the reasons is because the dump of hormone that's happening in their bodies, okay? Or in their brains, because their brain has so much going on in there with the hormone, and their body is growing and changing at such a rapid rate, they need sleep. So many of us are like, oh my word, they're so lazy, because they don't want to do anything anymore. And all they ever want to do is sleep. When in reality, this is a completely age appropriate thing that happens. Now, should we allow them to just be lazy? No. So here's the thing. Just because we know about the brain doesn't mean we stop training. Okay. We have to keep our tolerances in a good place. We just tolerate the fact that, okay, they need more sleep. So sometimes during the school day, because I'm a homeschool mom, if one of my children falls asleep, I might say to myself, you know what, they probably need a nap. So when they are like 9 and they've had plenty of sleep and they're just wanting to go to sleep because they don't want to do their work, am I going to tolerate it? No. But when they're like 13 or 14 and I know where their brain's at and they just need to go to sleep for a second, I'm just going to let them sleep for a second because they need it. And I'm not going to think that that's a bad thing. And when they get up, I'm going to say, so did you have a good little nap? Okay, well, here we go. And I'm not going to make a deal out of everything. If maybe they, should have been even doing a chore or something like that and they fell asleep. It's not going to be a major crisis. It's not going to be something that I would correct the same as I did when they were younger before their brain hit this stage of development. Okay, so many teens do not have enough melatonin, okay? Melatonin is something that helps calm. Remember, oxytocin and melatonin. Oxytocin from touch, melatonin comes from actually the foods that they eat and the stimulation that they have. It's something that hormones alter the release of melatonin and sometimes can stop the release of melatonin. A lot of people don't know that, but when you have so much hormone dumping in your brain, your melatonin might not released. So do you know how we have these young people who want to just stay up late in the night? It's like they can't get up in the morning, but then they can't go to bed at night. And you'd think, well, heavens, you've had this whole long day. Why in the world are you not going to sleep at night? Okay, well, the reason why is because their melatonin sometimes is not releasing. There are ways that we can have the melatonin release, okay? Calm activities. So gaming is not a calm activity. Okay, calm things like reading and stuff can help release melatonin. Listening to soft music can release melatonin. Laying still can release melatonin. It can take them a lot longer to go to sleep, though, which actually is kind of sad for them. And eating the right foods at dinner. So vegetables and things like eggs. So protein things, okay? Eggs, turkey, a lot of people know turkey releases melatonin, but meats, nuts, eggs, stuff like that, those things actually release melatonin, and some proteins and vegetables. So they need to have good food. If they're just having like pizza and if they're just having, carbs and stuff like that, they're not going to have that calmness that comes from melatonin as well. Anyway, so the prefrontal cortex is not fully developed yet, but it is way more developed than it has been in the past. So this means that they're making more permanent tracks. They're deciding who they are at this time. So this is vital. Like I said, it usually hits at about age 14. They said, this is who I am. This is my flaws. These are my strengths. These are my talents. This is who I am. Before that, they're like, I'm not sure my talents. But then by then they kind of know, okay? Anyway, so during this time, they're also kind of slow, okay? Like they seem ditzy, okay? Or they can't think fast, which is funny because like in a game or something, it seems like they can think super fast. But when they're just like in communications, sometimes they can't think fast. They seem slow. And the reason why they seem slow is because the axons that are on the tails of their neurons that are in their brain, so they've got all these neurons that have been made, and the tails on those neurons that make synapses actually get covered with a layer of fat. It's called the myelin sheath. And this layer of fat during this stage makes it so the synapses don't touch each other as much as they should. Those little tails are supposed to touch each other. So if they're not quite touching each other because there's these fatty layers, then if you're like, oh, we've read that book before, don't you remember it? We've talked about this before, don't you remember it? And they're like, no. Like they actually probably don't remember it. So don't take it personal if you have to teach something again. You've probably taught stuff now in how many phases? Guess what? When they hit age 12 to 18, guess what? You get to teach it again. That's how it goes. That doesn't mean it's going to be the same difficulty of learning. No, it'll come back to them. The synapses will join up, but they do have that fatty layer that's in there that makes it hard for them to hook the pieces together. So that's important to understand. And sometimes it means it requires more talking, more problem solving, more sorting than it might have required before they actually were older, which is strange. I know. The brain does a lot of pruning, so they lose some of their connections as well. If they didn't use whatever they had, maybe they learned a language. I always crack up these people that do immersion programs for their kids when they're teeny in school, because if they don't actually use the language later, like I did German, I only know like a few songs and a few words and like the numbers. And that's because we repetitively practiced those things again and again and again. But all the other stuff I learned for communication was like gone because I just didn't use it. So my brain pruned it out. I just don't even have it. And that's what happens when you forget stuff. Your brain prunes things. Anyway, teens don't read emotional expressions well. That's super important to know. They, like, sometimes we might think somebody looks shocked and they might think that they look afraid, or vice versa. So they might read your tone as something different than it is. They may be like, don't be so rude, and that, because they think you're coming across in a really bad way. And that's because they're processing stuff with different emotions because of the hormones. So these hormones actually make their brain functions, like, do all kinds of different things. And we just need to be aware of that. And so if they think you're coming across as rude, they shouldn't be saying, don't be so rude. They should be disagreeing appropriately with you. That's the appropriate way to handle that. But still, if they feel like your tone was off, say, thank you for letting me know that that's how you're perceiving that tone right then. I thought I was doing it this way. I'll try to work on that. And just leave it there. Like, don't spend time doing tons of debating and rationalizing and stuff like that. Anyway, they oftentimes misunderstand people. They have mood swings, stuff like that. That's the things they're dealing with. They take more risks, though, at this time, which is great. You need to capitalize on that and help them step out and take more risks and ownership for themselves. For well, but they are, working on it. Anyway, I don't know why it says that my internet is not good. Hopefully I'm not going to lose this here right at the end. Okay, so you can read the rest there. Their brain, is just not developed yet. They're looking for pleasure and rewards. That is their main thing that they're seeking. The pleasure centers in the brain are like on fire, super heightened. So they want to take risks, get pleasure. They don't connect well. They don't read people well. They can't put all the pieces together because they're feeling a little dense. I mean, that is literally where they're at. I mean, what a hard time, that they're dealing with. So when they get rewards, they respond well. So sometimes I've had my teenage children set up rewards for themselves to accomplish something hard that they've had a hard time doing. Like, I want to get through this series of books or this, whatever it is. And I'll say, well, set yourself up a reward. So they'll set themselves up some big reward system that they want to get. Right now, London and Porter have a big reward that they're working toward. And we have this family book thing that we're doing where we actually are saving a certain amount of money per book that the family reads. They are getting at the end of their high school years, and there's a lot of books that, because they had dyslexia, we're wanting to just push in, and they know that, so we're beefing up the reading, and then this money is going toward a family trip that we're planning on doing next year. And so that's a huge reward. They've helped plan the trip. They're super excited about it. So they're like, read. And they're just like pushing through the reading. So sometimes they need bigger reward days to get themselves really on track. Okay. Yeah, that's probably good. But think of the rewards and what happens to them because of the reward center in their brain. Think of like thumbs ups, thumbs down. Okay. Likes on social media, next level on the game, whatever. That all feeds the reward or pleasure center of the brain. So it's no wonder that they get so drawn to it and so sucked in by it. So what can a parent learn from this? Praise more. Praise more. Touch more. Talk more. Do exciting things more. That's super important. Okay, let's talk about what they need. They need to learn to do hard things. They need to develop adult skills. They need to mature. That's what they need. And it's a hard road for them for a little while. They need to share their opinions and ideas with somebody who's not going to judge them. That's important. They need real heroes, and they need adult responsibility, as well as more sleep. They need more planning for their life and happiness. They need more self-control. They need more freedom. Actually, they want the more freedom, but what they don't understand is that the self-control actually is what leads to the more freedom. So they need to understand the connection between self-control and freedom. They need to bond and fit in with the family because they are super worried about fitting in at this stage. And that connection to the family leads to more happiness than fitting in with the peers. They need parents to realize that they are looking for who they are and to be there to guide them in the right direction. Okay, they need to use the parents need to see themselves as the guide still, even though the child is older and can do more. And they need to use their brains a lot because of this pruning that's happening. And there's a lot of synapses that are getting pruned out because they're not used. They need to use as much as possible. This will help them have more confidence and intelligence later in life. So what do parents think they need? Parents think they need more social time. In reality, they actually need less social time and more time focused probably on their own self-improvement, their academics, and their time with family. So that is somewhat not a helpful thing. Parents also think they need digital devices during these ages. They need more freedom and they need to be left alone. All of those things are not good. Well, more freedom is good, but the more freedom needs to come with the more self-government that they have for themselves. So what do they want? They want help. They want autonomy to understand. They want to feel important in the world, to fit in socially. So see, they want to fit in, so they need to fit in with the family first. That's the most important place they can fit in. They want to feel smart. They feel themselves losing information. I remember that feeling and how awkward it felt. I'm like, I knew this. Why am I counting the minutes on the clock when I've been telling time since I was 4 years old? And now I'm 14 and I'm like 5, 10, 15. I don't even know what time it is. Like, I mean, there are things that they're losing that are super frustrating. They want adult perks, okay? And they want bonding. So they want all these digital perks, and then oftentimes they do it, they try to get it without bonding, by pushing away and by demanding and stuff like that. But they actually want the bonding too. They just don't know how to try to get all these things all at the same time. So they come across wrong. And so we need to say, I know you want freedom. I know you want to have these adult things and you feel like you're ready for them, So we need to think in terms of, when we're giving them no answers, think in terms of doing it in kind of more of a disagree appropriately way. We still have the role to give the no answer, but we need to help them know that we know where they're coming from. Okay. And then we need to explain to them, what you need to be doing is you need to be focusing on bonding in the relationship, because then that helps you get more perks. When you're not bonding in the relationship, you don't get the more perks. So you need to appeal to that prefrontal cortex and try to help them sort out that problem. Anyway, they also want the truth. They absolutely do. They want to think independently. This is often manifested in moodiness, okay, or passion. So, and then that desire to think independently is a great thing. And it's because of all the stuff that's happening in their brain. They want to feel like they get control of this. It feels so vulnerable. You feel kind of like trapped in this place where you're working so hard on the brain, yet for some reason it's not working quite right, and they just want it to work right. And so sometimes they get frustrated, which leads to a lot of moodiness. Okay, so what are some of the traps for the youth ages 12 to 18? Many are mistakenly given too much social time and not enough family bonding time. It's tempting to always do activities with friends because it's just so easy. But they need some time only with family too. Now, do my children do quite a few activities with their friends? Do they schedule them with their friends? Yes, they do. They schedule them in. They still get all their academics and everything done. But that if that starts replacing the amount of family time that is needed, that's actually going to be a really bad thing, and I'm going to adjust that. I don't tolerate that to happen, because the family bonds are more important. All right, second, many parents think that the youth need more digital perks as well, just because they want it. This is not a need, it's a want. It's fad based. Okay, we have extended our adolescence because of these devices. We have disabled their brains. They don't even need to learn how to think through a problem as much anymore. They just ask Google everything. We are smart if we delay the introduction of the digital devices. That is the smart thing to do, so that they can increase their ability to think, which is going to be way more important for them than the devices later on. Parents oftentimes go too easy on their children, And that's not a smart thing either. This delays adolescence. We need to not go easy on them. We need to let them grow up. In fact, we need to push them toward growing up, have them do hard things. So London was texting, let's see, was this a year ago? She was texting this guy she met at a church camp. And they like kind of, think each other's fun, and they're texting, and, he lives kind of far away, so they're not going to really be running into each other face to face. And so I'm like, okay, well, how many times have you been texting this guy? Oh, well, a few times a week or whatever, we've texted each other. Okay. So I said, London, before you can text him again, because now it's been, a few weeks, you need to call him. You guys need to have a phone call. And she looked at me and she's like, okay, Mom, that might be awkward for him. A lot of people don't do that. And I'm like, yep, but you need to have a phone call, and you need to initiate a phone call with this boy, because you don't just text someone and you're never going to see him, and you're never going to even talk to him. And so she did. And then they started every once in a while having a phone call. So they would text and have a phone call. Now, do I want her to develop a major attachment to this boy? Not necessarily. I don't even know him that well because I wasn't at the camp. But anyway, do I want her to know how to have a good relationship? Yes. It requires doing something hard, making a phone call. Super hard. There was a dad that told me yesterday on the soccer field, my son had earned his whole, all of his scouting, and he just had to meet with one person, and it took him hours staring at the phone before he would make the phone call to meet with this one person, because it took so much courage. And he was 18 years old. 18, and he couldn't make a phone call. I thought, that's so sad. So sad. So we need to not disable our children. Don't go easy on them. Have them do hard things. Some parents think that the sleep problem is a solution to allow teens, and so they allow teens to sleep whenever they want. Even though the sleep thing is an issue, we got to make sure that they wake up and they try to live by a schedule, and don't text and surf and game and be on social media and all that kind of stuff all night long. We need to make sure they don't have those devices with them when they are in their bedrooms. My children do not get their own devices, smart devices, until they are 18 years old, and then I help them transition at that time, and they are just fine. They have not had any problems. So just so you know, that's the thing. Another big trap is don't tell everyone about the thoughts your youth has or their struggles. That's important. They'll stop talking to you if you do that. So try to keep those things to yourself and between them and you, and maybe sometimes not even telling your spouse. Like sometimes there's certain things I'm like, that's not a Spencer needs to know one, because he might actually discuss it in a way that isn't as sensitive as I would. And that's just the way you do. But make sure you are always that safe place for the child. So how do we communicate with them? Using teaching self-government. They should know all of those skills by then, but sometimes they start not wanting to use them. They get a little bit more entitled, okay, during that stage, or because they're a little bit more moody, they sass back instead of using their skills. So we've got to pre-teach them again to use those skills. They can do the complete rule of 3. They can be corrected or an extra chore. So for everything, they should be praised. You should be having lots of personal meetings with them, one-on-one. They need to increase their connection with their parents and stuff like that. So they need to be having their meetings. Those are really important, mentor meetings and stuff like that. They need to have more adult opportunities. So give them more instruction, not less. Do be tolerant of the fact that they might have a job or something like that. So London has a job. So sometimes she should be doing her dishes, but she's got to go to work. And so instead she goes to work, and then later she's going to do the dishes. Or I might do the dishes and then say, I did your dishes, and so I need you to do this other thing. And that's just what happens. Like, I just tolerate that because she's launching into adulthood. She's having a job. She's managing her life in a way that's really responsible. And if a person's not being responsible, I'm not going to be having those same kinds of tolerances for them. Anyway, they need to have someone to talk things out with, so make sure that you maintain that. After a while, they can transition from needing a chore to just being corrected with the words and the tone. So there's a point, like with London, she doesn't always earn an extra chore. Like, it's very rare that she would earn an extra chore. She's 17 years old. She's super responsible. She runs her life really well. She's super self-governed. She wakes up on time. She does great things. And so if there's something that she's missed that I need to correct, then I'll just say, oh, London, just now I gave you a no answer, and this is what you did, and it wasn't good, and this is what you should have done, okay? And she'll look at me and say, oh, sorry, Mom, let me redo that. And she'll just redo it. Her heart is in the right place. She doesn't need an extra chore. She's had all those years of earning an extra chore, learning the cause and effect, cause and effect, cause and effect. Her heart has been appealed to again and again through the tone and through all of the teaching. And so she knows when it's the wrong way. And so she'll just go, oh, okay, yeah, I got to fix that. And that's where my children are at right now. Now, Porter earns an extra chore a little bit more than London. He still has a little bit of a tendency to be a little bit more lazy than she does, although they kind of go back and forth. He's 15, almost 16. She's 17. So they're really getting up there. They have lived with this their whole lives. If you have a 15-year-old and you are just starting this, you have to have them earn an extra chore, and then they go through a graduation process. And so what it looks like is you say, okay, well, we're going to get really good at these skills and correcting them. This is what it's going to look like, because these are skills you need for life. I should have taught them sooner, but I didn't know them. So now we're going to teach them because they're vital. And then once you get to a point where we're really not correcting that often, and your heart seems like it's in the right place, and you want to actually do good, and that's really what it's all about, is your desire, your want to do good, then you won't have to earn an extra chore anymore, and we'll just go through the teaching. But if you ever go completely out of control and you're at that place, we will use the rule of 3, and we can always revert back to using the chores if needed. So they can graduate contingent on the fact that their heart stays in the right place. But if you ever need to go back to it, then you have that to fall back on. So this does not usually happen until they are getting closer to leaving the home, and until they have had oftentimes years of experience. Now, sometimes someone can go through this process very quickly. I had youth that came into my home as, say, 16 or 17-year-olds, which we were able to graduate from earning negative consequences, after about maybe 8 or 9 months, and then they were able to graduate from my home at about 12 months. So it is possible, but that was with major diligent effort. So just keep that in mind. Anyway, so they also need to see how self-governing is going to look as an adult. That is sorry, I went late. I went over by 30 minutes, it looks like. We need to know how our children learn in order to train and help them transform into who they're supposed to become. And we all have an idea of who they're supposed to become and why they are in our homes and why we get stewardship over them. We need to not just be concerned with getting stuff done and getting their emotions to go away. Then if that's our concern, then we're not giving them the full opportunity that they could have of having a change of heart. They need more learning from us. They need more training. They are hungry for it during all of their stages of development. They need to see their parents moving toward a self-governing phase of their own. It is never, ever too late to start teaching a child to govern themselves. Self-government is for all ages, for us, as well as it is for them. We need to make sure that we capitalize on the time that they are in our home. And the younger they are, the more teaching that we capitalize on. I mean, try to do it all the way along, but if you have young children, you do have a bit of an advantage. So there's a quote I want to share with you, again, out of this book, Cheaper by the Dozen. So this is from Father Gilbreth. He says he believed that most adults stopped thinking the day they left school, and some even before that. Isn't that funny? Because now that we know what's going on in their brains, it could seem that way, right? Anyway, he says, but a child, on the other hand, stays impressionable and eager to learn. Catch one young enough, and there's no limit to what you can teach. That is where our children are at. They need to be caught by us. We need to catch them where they're at. and teach them the things that they need to master themselves so that they can have freedom, so that they can have contentment and peace and joy in this world that is constantly feeding commotion and confusion and frustration and low self-worth. And it is never too late. Okay, so that is the end of the presentation part of what we're doing here. I'm going to go ahead and take questions for 30 minutes, and that's probably all I can do. So let me find my questions here.